Testing sound. Welcome to Cambridge City Council on the 3rd of March.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Performance Assets and Strategy Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday, the 3rd of March 2026 at 5:30. I'd like to welcome members of the Performance Assets and Strategy Committee, officers and members of the Cabinet who are in attendance, and any other members of the Council who are here. I'd like to welcome those watching online, and I would now like to ask members of the committee to introduce themselves. So I'll start with myself, as I've got the microphone. I'm Councillor Katie Porrer, and I'm chair of this committee.
Jenny Gawthorpe-Wood, Vice Chair.
Tim Griffin, Coleridge Ward.
Mike Davey, Petersfield Ward.
Hugh Clough, Newnham Ward.
Jamie Diel, West Chesterton. Patrick Shield, Arbury Ward.
And we're also joined by Councillor Rosie Moore, who's the Cabinet Member for Climate Action and Environment, and Councillor Simon Smith, who's the Cabinet Member for Finances and Resources, and Councillor Martin Smart, who's the Cabinet Member for Nature and Open Spaces and City Services. Hoping I've got that right. And can I also introduce Justin, who's our Senior Overview and Scrutiny Officer, and Claire, who is producing the meeting for us. And would officers present like to introduce themselves, starting with Ben?
Ben Binns, Assistant Director of Development and Economy in Place.
Afternoon all, Lynn Miles, Director of Economy in Place.
Jane Wilson, Chief Operating Officer.
Simon Oliver, Chief Digital Information Officer.
Thank you very much. We have two major items on the agenda tonight. And based on discussions at our pre-meeting, I have structured the discussion to ensure that we cover the issues in full, and I'll set out how we do this when we come to the relevant items. I do ask that throughout the meeting, members and officers keep their contributions focused and to the point, and that we try to avoid repeating points that other members have already made. Can I just check if there's any apologies for absence, as I haven't received any? I can see that Councillor Pounds, I think, is running a little late, but she will be here, so I'll update members when she arrives. And declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare an interest? No. And just remember, obviously, you can do that at any point during the meeting if it occurs to you that you need to do that. So moving on to item 3, the minutes. We are asked to approve the draft minutes of the last meeting, which was the 27th of January 26, which are in the agenda pack, and also the draft minutes from November, which were published last week and circulated to members this morning. Can I just ask past members if they're happy that these minutes, both meetings, are true and accurate summary? I'm taking that there's no objections. We can approve those. I'll sort out signing those with Justin later. Questions? We don't have any this evening. So we're going to move on to item 5, which is the City Centre Heat Network. And I'd like to welcome Ben Binns, who's the Assistant Director of Development, Economy in Place, and Councillor Rosie Moore, who's the Cabinet Member, as I mentioned, for Climate Action and Environment, and I think Lynn Miles as well, Director of Place and Economy, who are joining us. Councillor Moore will introduce the item, and Ben will then give a short presentation, which will also be published online, and we'll then move to questions. Councillor Moore, are you happy to give us an introduction?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is a huge and very exciting but complicated project. It fits in, or it's working towards the Council's vision that decarbonisation and sustainability are central to prosperity, and is working towards Cambridge being a net zero carbon city. So it aligns with the Council's vision. It aligns with our current climate change strategy, and assuming that all goes well for the next one, that it will with that one too. And it's a scheme for a district heat network which will cover our 4 main buildings in the city centre, as well as those of the 2 universities and a number of colleges in the city. It has the potential to reduce carbon emissions by 93% over the 40 years of the scheme, which is an absolute game changer in terms of the Council's own emissions. But as was mentioned in the other scrutiny committee when we looked at our climate change strategy. It's really working towards helping to decarbonise the city as a whole. Ben is going to give you some slides and a presentation. And just to say, we've got three of our partners here who are working on it. We've got Bill Wilson from Borough Happold, Jeff Laidler from Sustainability Co., who's been working with us on the project from the very beginning. He worked on the feasibility study, and James Derbyshire from Ambleside. So hopefully between us we'll be able to answer any questions. But now if I hand over to Ben to introduce it.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Just to note, Councillor Pounds has joined us for the meeting. Thank you very much, Councillor Pounds. No, well, thank you. Ben.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Committee, it's a short presentation on the aims of this project and where are we now. And I think the first thing to say, this is very much work in progress. So what we're showing today, what you're scrutinising today, is work to date. There's a lot more work to do, and just a reminder of what we're actually scrutinising today, what members are scrutinising today is, should the release of 600,000 be approved from the Climate Change Fund to look at the next steps. And those next steps include two key parts of the project that we need to look at. One is the strategic objectives of a council-led joint venture, and the second part is also the application for grant funding of £20 million. Now, in between that, there is work to be done on looking at the modelling and looking at the technology and bringing our partners along to the next stage. What we're not doing is scrutinising the final proposal. So just to recap, we are looking at work in progress. So this isn't the final proposal, and we will, as officers, come back to this chamber in March 2028, no later than March 2028, to present a final report. So there will be further work to be done, which will look at de-risking and how the finances work, and also in terms of what the market is saying in terms of contractor market and what they can bring to the project as well. And of course, by that time, we will have to have scrutiny from the Shadow Authority if LGR does proceed. So there's a number of hurdles to get through. And just to recap, we need a successful grant application. We will need our academic partners to sign up as customers or to be equity partners. We will need to get feedback from contractors, as already mentioned. It needs to financially stack up. And we will need further approval from Cabinet. So in terms of this early stage proposed layout, we are proposing two sources of heat, river source and air source heat pumps. And it is very much in the city centre and spread over 2 phases, but it will connect up to potentially 48 different connections of academic institutions if they wish to sign up, as well as 4 council assets. That's the Corn Exchange, that's the Guildhall, Parkside Pool and Kelsey Carriage. In terms of timings, as I say, we are currently at March 2026, so we're looking to do more commercialisation work, the grant bid, that's the Green Heat Network Fund bid. And then what we want to do is develop proposals to come back no later than March 2028, where we hope, if all the other things line up, we will be in a position to say we think this is a good position to be in and we should proceed to the next stage, which will be to develop out the proposals. It is a very long timeline. It goes right up to 2036, so completion would be towards that back end there if everything works according to plan. plan. In terms of governance, we have a robust governance structure in place at the moment. Now, given that we are involving numerous partners, I think it's really important just to give a bit of a steer to the committee on what the governance proposals are. So you've got the steering group at the top. That is all partners, potential partners who wish to be involved in this project. So that's numerous colleges and universities in the city centre, as well as the council and as well as county council. Now that provides the authority to keep moving forward and towards the next step. Each partner that wishes to be involved still has to get their own internal approvals, like we are tonight as the council. The core group, which includes our consultants, which are on screen and may answer some questions tonight, as well as the council, and we have 2 representatives from our academic partners. So they do the day-to-day running, the weekly work that needs to be undertaken for this project. The expert advisory group is essentially composed of academics within the city who scrutinise any proposals perhaps the steering group put forward, and that could range from technology, it could range from modelling, financing, or any other aspect of the project for them to scrutinise. And as I say, once the commercialisation work has been done, from the council perspective, for our approval, we will be coming back to Cabinet no later than March 2028, and that will be the same for other academic partners before we proceed into the stage of delivery and operation. Now, why do this? I think Councillor Moore has explained, but this is fast-track decarbonisation. There is no other way to achieve decarbonisation in the timelines with heritage buildings, and we've got plenty of heritage buildings in the city centre. In terms of numbers, 93% reduction in carbon. I mean, that's a phenomenal figure if that can be pulled off. There is one significant side effect to this as well. If we reduce the gas consumption, there will be a significant improvement also in air quality in the city centre as well. So we're looking for feedback as officers on this project. It is a full suite of papers. We've tried to adapt as little as possible. It is work in progress. I keep stressing this. There's more work to be done. And we're asking for feedback. Should the 600,000 be released to continue this work? Are you happy with the proposals in terms of timelines and the governance proposals? Are you happy with the due diligence that's taken place as a result of the project? And any other feedback would be welcome. In particular, whether you are supportive of this grant application for the Green Heat Network Fund as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. If you're okay to just leave that slide up, I think it will help remind us what we're ultimately going to be asked to recommend to Cabinet or not. So, as agreed, we've divided this up into areas. Seems sensible. So I'm proposing that we start with governance questions. So I'd like to ask members of the PAS committee whether you have any questions for either officers or obviously Councillor Moore on governance. Okay, I can see Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood, Councillor Griffin and Councillor Davey. So we'll take them in that order, please.
Okay, so you've described in the papers, you've got the strategic network, you've got the core, I can't remember what it's called, but, you know, you've got 2 groups. So, you know, I'm reasonably happy with that. We're going to, now I know this is the next stage of work to decide whether you have a joint venture with the council where we're a 51% stakeholder, shareholder, or stakeholder, both. What I wondered is, until you get to that commercialisation point, it would be helpful to actually perhaps come back to us next year when you put the grant in and when applied for the grant, and certainly as soon as you know you've got it. Things might have changed, and I mean the Green Heat Network Fund, that one. And actually, I did wonder whether you could, if you didn't get it, could you put it in for it again in the timescale we've got? So 2 applications, if the first one isn't successful, which I hope it will be. So that's my question. So, yeah, sort of 2.5 questions.
Thank you.
there,
If it's okay, do you want to answer that straight away? Some of it, I think, probably sits under some of the financing as well. But yeah, you happy to answer that now?
I'm happy, and I may bring in Jeff, one of our consultants, on screen about the application process, but in terms, from the council perspective, to come back to either this scrutiny or another committee as appropriate to give an update on whether we've been successful or not, I'm more than happy to come back, or one of my colleagues to come back. Jeff, if you're happy just to explain how the Green Heat Network Fund application works, we are aiming to make an application later on in the spring after this cabinet.
Yeah, that's right. So the funding round closes at the very start of May, and we're working hard on giving ourselves the best chance. It's a competitive process, and as part of that, we're seeking letters of support from our strategic partners to showcase the strategic partnership that we've got in place within the city. So that should give us the best chance of securing that funding.
Thank you very much. Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Gorforth-Wood?
But you could apply again if you didn't get it the first time round.
Yes, you could.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Griffin.
Thank you, and thank you for the reports. I'm very much support this project, the idea. It sounds very exciting. In reading this, in terms of governance, in reading the material, I just had one main question about the city's role in that, I mean, the city will be the lead in the project, will be the primary funder, the primary decision maker, a shareholder, majority perhaps shareholder, and a customer. So how are we going to manage possible conflicts of interest there in a way that's transparent and people can understand that? So maybe that's something that needs a little work, because I do think there are potential conflicts there that need to be handled somehow.
I think how you've described that is absolutely spot on, and what we have precedent with is if you consider our housing development programme, where there is funding from the council towards these development programmes, that goes through its own scrutiny process. There is individual projects that come forward by a cabinet in terms of housing development. So we're saying we will come back at each stage in terms of the council input. I think the question around the customer shareholder dynamics is one that the team have been grappling with for a long time, because our academic partners are also interested in that. And there is this trade-off between, if you want to be an equity partner and you want a higher return, that does tend to mean higher costs for the customer. So the whole approach for this project is to address decarbonisation and find that balance between what we want on a return versus what we're trying to encourage people to be customers. In terms of the governance, I think that's if we get to that stage, post-cabinet next time, we will need to report back on how that governance structure and reporting structure would work in more detail. There are some ideas in the report, but I think that needs to be further scrutinised, which is why we've laid out our work to sort of say, this is the current thinking. Have we got that right? Do we need to consider things a bit more? I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, I want to congratulate the council officers on taking this from when I look back on Andrew Lim's initial idea and work with a variety of people 4 or 5 years ago to get to this stage is fantastic. It's exciting, it's bold, it's innovative, and you don't have to sell to me why we're doing it. That just comes as great news, I think. But there are lots of issues, I think, and I'd really like to go back into governance, as has already been suggested. This is the area. Can you go back to the slide that you put up, I think, on governance, which is, I didn't see it in the pack, so forgive me if I've missed it. No, not that one, not the timing, it's governance, which is 2 after them. There we go. How's it going to work in the interim, in terms of you've got, I mean, I get that it's like, almost like KIP in a sense, but KIP's one partner. This is 17 colleges, the university, ARU, ourselves. How is that going to work at this early stage? How do you envisage that coming up at a later point? And linked to that, how and where, which has already been alluded to, will you be feeding back into the council structures? And how will the governance, about 17 colleges, Tim will know better than me, they all have different governance arrangements. And it just sounds mind-boggling, if I'm honest. And therefore, how is that going to work? I mean, I know part of the 600,000 is for that, but there must have been some initial discussions to look at, otherwise we wouldn't even got to here. So I would be interested to know a bit more, I think, about what your early thoughts are on governance, Ben.
I'll need to make a start on answering that, and perhaps my colleague James might be able to give a bit more detail on that. But essentially, the 49% as it stands, which would be other academic partners. Now, we have to be careful not to assume they will all sign up, but if in an ideal world they do sign up as equity partners, and that's who we'll be talking about on that board structure. And if there are potentially colleges and potentially up to 2 different universities, we don't know yet, that's for them to decide, then there are a number of different ways that could be addressed in terms of their representation on the 49%. But ultimately, it'll be a company structure where there will be a percentage, whether that's decided by the colleges and the universities or whether that is something they want to do individually, that's for them to work out how they get represented on that 49%. That's the working assumption at the moment. So there's not an answer there, but what it does mean, though, if it's a council-led joint venture, the council would have a 51% share. I'm just going to ask if James has got anything further to add to that, James. Is it possible you can add anything on that?
Thanks, Ben. No, I think you've covered it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I come back then?
Yes.
There was a question about the interim arrangements, but also it's not just up to the colleges to decide how they have 49%, it's up to all the partners, surely. And that has to be negotiated. Obviously they will lead, but we have to be happy with what they put forward. And I think there's something in there that I think, if I'm honest, feels like it needs more attention, particularly when you're looking at the scale of the project. And if we don't get the governance right early on, I would start to feel, not against that, let me get this right, I would worry about how we're able to fulfill what we're actually seeking to do, which is going to be hugely important. And there must be structure within the university that can help us, I think, in that, rather than making something up new. Thank you.
Lynn, did you want to?
Yeah, can I just add to sort of hopefully give greater confidence about the way we're thinking about this? Essentially, it will be a separate company. We will have some ownership. A board structure will be set up where the voting arrangements reflect the shareholder ownership. So it won't be that 19 people need to agree on everything. There will be some sort of voting structure. There are a number of different ways that could be delivered, and the next phase of work looks at that in more detail. But ultimately, like any sort of company with a large range of shareholders, they all do come to a way of taking decisions, ultimately, and ensuring that day-to-day work happens and big picture decisions and strategic interests get considered. So there are lots of different models, we'll have to look at which, but it's not an insurmountable problem.
Fully accept it's not insurmountable, otherwise nothing would happen, but which involved the university. So clearly I accept that. I just think I'm posting it now, and then there's a second bit to that question. Presumably we've learned from KIP. how do decisions made by this separate company then come back into this council? Because again, there needs to be scrutiny about the decisions or some sort of notions about how the decisions are approved by members, particularly if we've got 51%. So again, are there any early thinking behind how that might happen?
Actually, if I might jump in as well, because I was going to ask a very similar question. On the KIT board, we have 2 cabinet members, so currently Councillor Simon Smith and Councillor Jerry Bird, who have a democratic mandate. They can come to council, we can ask questions. And I haven't seen that in these arrangements. I appreciate how the board works, may need to be a different structure, but I would echo Councillor Davies' concerns that, you know, this is the council for our residents. We need to make sure that, particularly if we're replicating the model of the KIT, which does seem to be working quite successfully, you know, Councillor Moore isn't on these papers, for example, and I would expect to see her. So if I could just add that, please.
So, yeah, I mean, I think these are all valid questions, and how, from the council, but also our academic partners, how they report back to their respective institutions is part of the commercialisation work that we're going to have to address. We don't have the answers now, but that is a really important bit of work that needs to be addressed, particularly for the council, but also for our academic institutions. If I could just also quickly answer, you said, how does it work now? How it works now is very much everybody is in the room, particularly on the steering group, and recommendations are made to the steering group from the core group. So it has been challenging at times to try and get everyone lined up, and it is pretty remarkable we've managed to get to this stage working so well with our partners. So I think everyone's asking the same question in summary, and we've got to get it right, and that's the next bit of work that we need to come back to this scrutiny and share.
Just to say thank you, that's reassuring, and also please, I hope it doesn't take away from the view, my view certainly, that this is an astonishingly good project and we need to get hold of it and take it forward. But thank you, Ben.
Thank you. I have Councillor Pounds and Councillor Clough and Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood. Oh, Becky, did you want to come back on that particular point?
I just need to declare an interest as being a volunteer director of the Reach Community Solar Farm, and we did try to develop a heat source pump system similar to the one in the nearby village.
Oh, thank you very much. And Justin will note that for the record. Councillor Pounds.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to echo what Councillor Davies said, I mean, it's a really brilliant idea and it's very exciting. I just had the same concerns, really, and I just wondered, with your steering group and with the 17 partners, is there any contract, any formal contract, or is it just that they've come to the table and want to share? I mean, could they pull out at any time, or have they given commitments? Have they given any commitments, basically, please? Yeah.
Okay, so there are a number of layers to that. In terms of when we start moving to the next stage, it will be very difficult to recommend to Cabinet next time to say we should proceed if we don't have agreement from our academic partners to either be a customer or an equity partner or both. It just won't stack up. So there is an element of the need for our academic partners to be on board. So that's absolutely integral to the project, number one. In terms of who's signed up to the project in the run-up to today, Jeff, I think this is probably a good question for you just to confirm without naming names, but we have got structures in place.
Yeah, so as we move through the different project stages, we're looking for senior buy-in from all the respective partners so that everyone's got the confidence that they can move forward together at the same time. So at this particular point, it's going through all the individual governance approvals similar to the council, but each partner is going through their own formal approval process. And the ask at this stage is twofold. One is a letter of support for the Green Heat Network Fund, and the other is an updated version of the Memorandum of Agreement. So it's signing up, it's non-legally binding, but it's signing up to what the next stage is about. So people can still walk away, anyone can still walk away. It won't be until final investment decision that everyone actually signs up. But we're gradually working through, we've been listening carefully to everyone, what their particular concerns are where they see the opportunities and see if we can find the sweet spot between all of that and move everyone along. And so far, it's worked well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clough.
Yes, I'm interested in the technical complexity of the project, because I think that I just wonders, what worries me is that it may be slightly different from the work which KIP does, which essentially is a financing project. You acquire a site and then you put people on site to build buildings, and that's all established technology. Here it feels as if we are likely to be, well, all right, you know, happy to have that corrected, very much at the frontier of technology. Okay, maybe standardized technology has been brought in. So I wonder whether the governance arrangements and need to be have a much shorter cycle time. And also we've got this issue of looking at that, I've been struck by the complexity of the map, which is running across the centre of Cambridge, and I just don't know what, like in terms of the utilities and such like that we've got to go through and how big.
We'll pick that up under the risks later, if that's okay.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I'm just saying that I feel that we need to have a set of governance arrangements which are open, transparent, and short cycle times, rather than having sort of 6 monthly reports back, and which may hide things which have emerged and we're not suddenly aware of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ben, did you want to comment?
I mean, we can certainly take on board your points. I mean, in terms of governance going forward, I think there would have to be, from a company, regular reporting back to council and our academic partners. I don't see any concern in order to do that, whether that's reporting risks, income, profit, whatever a company typically wants to report, and anything else the council or our academic partners want to report on. That is standard reporting procedure from my experience from companies dealing with the council. So whether that's monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, that can easily be implemented if we get to the approved stage of that company.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, to echo other members' comments, I think this is a very exciting project. But I guess then the challenge for us is how to not be overtaken by the excitement of such a kind of groundbreaking piece of work and make sure we're also managing the risks. As we're on governance, I just wondered, I think Councillor Daly picked some very good points about the partner working. So far, have there been any examples of dilemmas or contentious issues that have required navigation, or are there any particular sort of points that we think will make a big difference to the relationships that we're building with the various academic institutions?
I think we can speak broadly. Again, the academic partners, for them to confirm whether they're going to join this exciting project or not, and they're going through their own approval process. I refer back to the point made about the balance between return on investment as equity partners and ensuring there's enough incentive to become a customer. And so there's been a lot of work around what's called the counterfactuals. If we didn't do anything as a council or as an academic institution, what would the cost be for us to decarbonise compared to what is being proposed? So that's been looked at in great detail. There's been a number of different scenarios around whether we do fully decarbonise to get to 99, 100%, or do we phase in or phase out gas, to be correct, over time. So a number of different scenarios around that's been looked at as well. So really, I would say the biggest discussion point has been around that balance between incentivising institutions to want to become a customer, because it is cheaper to do it this way, compared to how do you balance a return on investment. And that's the scale we're navigating through. And I think it's fair to say, if I can bring in James, that's essentially what the overall modelling debates have been about. Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. It's always about balancing risk and reward and control with these sorts of projects.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other... Oh, Councillor Moore, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say obviously, as we've mentioned, there are risks in this project, and until everyone is signed up, we don't know who will be joining us, if the council itself will be going forward. This is just agreement to move to the next step. However, the partners are the City Council, the County Council, the two universities, ARU and Cambridge, and a number of colleges. So LGR withstanding, those are all organisations with a long-term investment in Cambridge City and its buildings, their buildings, and a long-term, we hope, unless anything changes, but that's another risk, for example, if there's changes politically. But we all have very ambitious decarbonisation targets, and that is the purpose of this scheme, is to decarbonise our sometimes very difficult older buildings and be able to run them going into the future. And this work that's just being presented highlights the savings, not just in carbon by doing it collectively, but actually financially to each of the partners in doing it collectively. So there are risks, but we're also very lucky that we're in a much better position than maybe other city centres would be by having such partners to work with.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Davey.
Rosie's comments are helpful, but it does raise a second question for me. Sorry, a separate question for me. Have we kept South Cambs in the loop? I'm not asking for their opinion, but just so they're aware of what's going on, bearing in mind with LGR coming, so they know.
I was just about to ask the same, because obviously that's a very obvious partner that under whatever comes forward with LGR, we will be working with, I think.
So I think absolutely we need to start thinking about socialising at least with officers and members.
Councillor Davey was just saying the answer's no.
No, not yet.
No, there have been presentations to South Cambs.
Okay,
there
that's
have
a
been,
yes then.
so they're not completely unknown, but I do think it's worth another round of briefing so that they can be get up to speed with the full details.
Thank you,
Thank you very much. It may be worth noting for the documents, because it doesn't have South Cambs in at the moment, I don't think, which is what Councillor Davies wanted. Lynn.
I was just going to add that the timescales of this mean that the decision would be taken either by a shadow authority or by the new authority when it's in as well. So that does increase the need to brief, but it also means that we're not in a situation where we're asking Cambridge City Council to take a decision on behalf of the new council.
Thank you. I think it's more that we want to make sure South Cambs are on board so that when a decision comes forward, we have... if that's the end of governance, I'm just going to quickly sum up as to what we're going to report back to Cabinet, and obviously Councillor Moore's here anyway, but I shall do it at Cabinet. We wanted to ensure that we have an update on the grant decision, whether that's agreed or not or partially. We're asking Cabinet, and obviously Ben and his team, to reflect on the board structure, the involvement of the City Council and the City Councillors, so looking at the JV with KIP and how that involves elected members. We're looking for open and transparent reporting with no surprises, and obviously just mindful of those potential conflict of interests in terms of us having multiple hats in this, and obviously mentioning South Cambs. Members happy with that? Yeah. I know we've all mentioned our support, but we'll sum that up at the end, I think. Thank you. Can I suggest we move on to finance/business case? I appreciate some of this overlaps. We may have addressed some of the risk issues already. So does anyone have any questions on the finance and the business case assumptions? Councillor Griffin.
Thank you. This question overlaps risk and finance, so they're closely related. And it has to do with this interim gas boiler usage, and that has me greatly concerned, not only because of the potential risks in terms of cost. I mean, the reason I'm bringing it up now under finance is it seems to be justified use of gas in terms of finance. I mean, in terms of cost, right? That's the justification. But I worry about that, and I also worry about the politics of it, because, you know, we're trying to replace these gas boilers with another gas boiler, and there could be people objecting to that for maybe good reasons, and so yes, that's the one sort of red flag that I kept thinking about when I was reading the report. And also just the detail, where are these boilers going to be located?
So if I've understood this correctly, this is the phasing out of gas boilers over time. So most institutions, including ourselves, will have gas boilers to heat a building such as this. The question that was posed to everybody was, if we go straight to decarbonisation, we replace all our boilers with air source heat pumps or connection to the heat network, what does the cost look like for that, and what's the return, particularly on carbon, for that? And the costs do go up quite a bit if we decarbonise immediately, because some of these boilers are relatively new in some of these places. So the phasing out does reduce the carbon reduction from 99 to 93, but it reduces the cost over time, which makes the joining up more palatable.
Just a clarification. So just a clarification, we're not going to be constructing new gas boilers.
No.
Okay.
This is existing.
Okay,
boilers.
then that's okay.
Yeah.
So I was a little confused about that. Okay, it's going to be the customers are going to be using their own gas boilers in the transition. Okay, fine. And I just realized by looking at the list of colleges that I may have a conflict of interest, because I'm a fellow of King's College, but I'm an emeritus fellow, which means I'm not on the governing body. I don't vote on anything in King's College. So I don't know if that's a conflict of interest or not.
I think we can note that as a declaration of interest if you feel your discretion is unfettered, particularly at the moment we don't know who the redacted ones are, so I'm happy if Justin's able to know that. I can see that Jeff has his hand up. Ben,
yeah.
are you happy for him to speak?
Jeff, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, do you mind? I was just going to talk about, so there is the transition for everyone that's got their own gas boilers, and then as was talked about at the start, everyone's got stretching decarbonisation targets, and everyone wants us to decarbonise as quickly as possible. So we set out to fully electrify from the get-go. So as soon as the heat network goes live, I think it's important to clarify the use of transitional gas boilers. So there's the base load, which we're looking to provide and source entirely from heat pumps. So the majority of the heat demand will be provided by heat pumps. The issue we've got is within the UK at the moment, the price differential between gas and electricity means that actually that is the peak heating that you need is quite expensive. So we've got a pragmatic approach where we've modelled the use of transitional gas boilers for the first sort of 15 years. And the idea being that you can actually make the economics work, which means that you incentivize people to connect. So it's trying to work out the way where you can decarbonize as quickly as possible while maximizing the number of people that connect to the network. So we are looking to phase out everyone's use of gas, and the way to do that is at a network level to use heat pumps and then use transitional gas boilers for the peak heating for the first 15 years. After that, we'll then use electric boilers and we'll be fully electrified, and that sort of fits with the national approach to heat networks, and recent guidance from government was talking exactly the same, that's the way to do it.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Griffith? Does anyone else have any questions on Councillor Davey, go ahead.
Yes, I do. I suppose it's the blindingly obvious one. Whilst your costs is of 121 million now, it won't be in whatever years' time. So the question therefore will be, when you bring in partners, and including ourselves in that, is there going to be a percentage base as to what they contribute, so that if and when things go up, they won't say, no, we've only agreed to X. I'm sorry, you have to bear the rest of the cost. I mean, I'm sure you're far more adept at this than me, Ben, but it would just be good to have a reassurance about how that might work when the costs inevitably start to spike.
I'm going to bring in James. Have we got inflation included in the cost? Can you just remind everyone where the baseline is and what that might mean for contributors?
Yes, certainly. So there's two figures that get reported as part of the business case. The first one is in a real price base, which is an uninflated number, so that's what it costs today. And then what we tend to report in for the financing perspective is a nominal price base, which takes into account a set of assumptions for an inflation profile over the 40 years of the project, which means that costs further down the line are inflated so that their actual cash value is already built in. So there is already some uplift in what's considered at the 40-year level.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it isn't a percentage, though, it is, but it's an inflation. You're comfortable
worried about James is kind because I think Jamie and Ben probably know more about this, the way this works than me, but the fact that it's been inbuilt is the reassurance for me.
Thank you. Councillor Dale?
No, that answer made sense to me. Looking at section 7.2 under the financial implications, one of the sort of oddities, I guess, is that the net present value, which was different, but on a similar basis, it's going to be based on similar calculations, that will be zero for the other equity investing partners. And I guess I'd be concerned that does sort of undermine the ability to attract these partners into this arrangement. Can I just confirm, my understanding of that effectively means they won't have any financial return, and whether that's been kind of discussed, agreed, and is consistent with current negotiations.
So I'll give a broad summary, then I think James may need to come on to this. But this comes back to that balance between equity and connection costs, and the modelling with the current work in progress suggests council-led JV is going to lead to the best outcomes. Now, what that does mean then is that the contracting arrangements are very different, because effectively they would be building and operating rather than as developer, which would require a higher profit or a higher margin or a higher return on investment. So it's finding that balance, including the financial lending and on-lending that goes with that, to make sure it works. We have to speak very generally because we are going to market. So I don't know, James, if you can add anything to that without circumventing the sort of confidentiality, but just trying to give a flavour of some of the discussions we've been having to try and get that right balance.
Surely, just to pick up on the MPV point, really, it's based on a discount rate, which is set at an indicative hurdle rate. So the NPV of 0 simply means that indicative hurdle rate has been achieved. So it's actually good news. What we're really looking at is the extent of return over cost of capital, which is one of the drivers of that hurdle rate.
I guess, just to go back on that point, won't the hurdle rates be potentially different for every partner? So it just seems difficult that, maybe we're just assuming a hurdle rate for all and that we think we've met that. So I guess
at this stage,
have a different view.
At this stage, yes, it's an outline business case. Everything is quite indicative and subject to further iteration through the commercialisation process, which itself will take it through to a full business case. At the moment, without sort of firm equity partners in place, we've taken a sort of a sensible market value, which we've agreed with the strategic partners around what a sort of sensible level of return might look like. So it's based entirely on that hurdle rate.
Thank you, Councillor Dale. You have, is there a recommendation you suggest we need to make to Cabinet about that in terms of reviewing that? I think it's probably in your area of expertise rather than mine. So.
Let me think on that.
Well, I'm happy to come back to you in a bit if you want to ponder. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh,
So it's just
David.
there's no harm in flagging it up, is there? If I'm honest, Stephen, if the wording...
Yes, I'd be grateful if Councillor Dale could think about how best I could flag that in a recommendation. As I say,
Yeah, I
not
think the key
yeah.
point is it does sound like there's still quite a lot in discussion, and that will be quite sensitive to actually the overall relationship. So I guess if we can make sure that's reported.
Would you like to call it the hurdle? So we want to review the hurdle rate of the MPV.
Maybe we can just say that you'd flag this as a point, and I can maybe suggest some wording to this group.
Is that, are you comfortable with that, Ben? Councillor Moore? Yeah, that's great. We'll come back with the correct wording. As I say, I'd like to make sure I get my accounting terms right. Thank you. Councillor Pounds.
Thank you. I just got a couple of slight sort of suggestions. Going back to the gas issue, we do have some retrofitting projects going on, particularly in my ward of Romsey, and we're learning a lot about how to maximise the heat source pumps in order to reduce electricity consumption, to make them more, and that it might be worth looking at that. You might find some useful from that pilot study. The other thing, of course, is the geothermal power plant in Cornwall. You might want to look at how that's getting on, because that will, there's bound to be lessons learned from that. I think it's the first one, isn't it, that's been done. And the other thing was just Centrica and the gas company are busily digging up all the roads, particularly in my area, and replacing all the gas mains. And it might be that you could do us all a favour and say that that won't be necessary. I don't know if that's possible. It would be very welcome.
The timescale may be optimistic to not replace the gas mains, but I'll leave that one to Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we can do is look at coordination. So if we do get to the next stage of construction, coordination is going to be really important, and that means digging once, trying to only dig once over that period. So that is something that's been taken on board and very seriously.
Thank you, because I mean that was really the point, is that Cambridge is under siege really, and it's only going to get worse, isn't it, with the all the other developments that are coming, and any reduction that we can have by joined up thinking would be, I think, really good. Yeah.
Thank you very much. If there aren't any more, I had one question. So one of the benefits of this project, as I say, is this government proposal for a requirement to connect, which broadly means that if someone is building a new site and there is an existing heat network, there is a requirement to try and connect in. Obviously, that's not in this initial stage, but I just wondered if officers could talk a little bit about that possibility, how we're modelling that. Can we take some confidence that if this is a successful scheme, you know, in the future we are future-proofing it so that we can build in, whether that's residential, whether that's your kind of CBC sites that are obviously outside the scope at the moment, because for me, I think I've understood that that would make the business case stronger if we have that option in the future. But I'd be grateful for some comments on that.
Again, I'll speak broadly, and perhaps this is one for Bill from Viewer Happel, but it's essentially which we are trying to future-proof the city centre with what's called the minimum viable proposition. So it's what will work, that is possible. Sorry, excuse me. And with this government initiative that's coming in, does give scope for expansion in the future. It's not something we refer to explicitly, but if it does become mandatory, then it does give the opportunity for this potential new district network to expand. I don't know if that's a question for you, Bill. Do you want to come in on that?
And I think it's really, are we future-proofing to make sure we can do that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
Yes, yeah. So in short, yes, yeah, we've got kind of some key routes along the network where we've planned in for extra capacity for that expansion. And we also undertook a preliminary zoning study, which the future heat network zoning, which is coming through from central government following their modelling process, which implies that the city centre area will become a heat network zone, subject to, you know, formal zoning process. And so, yeah, we've taken that into account in our future briefing.
Thank you very much. So if that's all of the questions for the moment. Oh, I beg apologies, Councillor Clough.
So I think I don't quite understand that. Does that mean that the government will create areas of cities where you have to connect and that's the only way in? Is that, what is a heat zone?
My understanding is when a new development comes forward, there would be a requirement for them to investigate if there's a heat network nearby that they could connect to, but I'm very happy to stand corrected. That's with my planning and transport hat on. So it wouldn't mean that an existing house would have to connect, but if you were building out a site, for example, the airport site, whatever, then they would have to look. And obviously, if we're one of the innovatives who have this network in place and no one else does, that would mean they're most likely to consider connecting to us. But I'm just going to check that with Ben and Lynn in case I've got that wrong.
Yeah, I think Bill got his hand up. Will provide.
Yeah. Yeah, so it will impact existing buildings in areas that become designated zones as well, but only certain types of buildings of a certain size, and there will be various exclusions. But if the city centre became a zone, there are many that would be required to connect as the current guidance stands.
Thank you very much. Does that answer your question, Councillor Clough?
As I understand it, that if you've got a building of a certain size and you're inside a designated heat zone, you will be expected to get on and connect. Is that it? Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Oh, that's even more positive, I think.
And also it highlights that if the council aren't involved in this project or a project for a city centre district heat network, but we become, the government regulate that we're a district heat network zone, then we possibly would have to connect to somebody else's scheme. So although there are lots of risks in this, there also would be risks in not going ahead with our own scheme on top of the sort of climate change risks that we're all facing.
Thank you. I think that probably flags up, which is in the report, that do-nothing option as being something to keep under review, because obviously when we have this legislation, as Councillor Moore says, it will become clearer, and that is a risk if we don't do this. We're then paying someone else, presumably. Councillor Clough?
So, as I read it, if the advantage of us moving ahead is that otherwise we could be in a situation where we're forced into a compulsory sort of BFI structure with costs that we can't actually control. Is that what we're being told?
Councillor Moore is nodding.
Well, we don't know. We don't know who would create, if we weren't doing this, who would, and then if they sort of get in there first and we then have to join. So that's not why we're doing this. The council's project started first, or maybe at least first I know we knew about it. Possibly the government were looking into the work previously. Perhaps someone online knows better than I do. But yes, that's a risk. But hopefully not a risk we have to face because we are progressing with this, our project. And I just wanted to say on the residential, because that has come up a couple of times, that because of the fact that this is in the city centre and that the organisations who so far look like we might all cooperate together have such a high level of need in such a small area, it makes the scheme financially viable in a way that starting in residential areas wouldn't be. So by starting in this way, we have the capacity, hopefully in the future, that is a very long way off, but of extending further out into residential areas. But if we were trying to start in residential areas, it would not be as successful or as viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Davey.
It's just hopefully relatively simple. I'm assuming Peter Freeman is aware of what we're up to.
I'm pretty sure he is. I'm sure there's been a briefing to Cambridge Growth Company and others. I would have to check with Jax, who's leading on the scheme, but I'm fairly certain he has.
You like to put
Not
that as a
100% one, Alan, but if it hasn't happened, can we? Because this looks like one that's an obvious meat and drink one to Peter, who needs to be aware of what's going on, not least because of the potential implications for other developments that might be taking place around the city in the coming years.
I'll take that away and check, and if not, we will definitely do it.
Grateful.
Thank you. If that's the end of questions, I will sum up again. I think in terms of, well, Cabinet, Councillor Moore and Ben and his team, I'll try that again. We're mindful that we need to keep an eye on the costs versus the carbon benefit, and particularly how that is affected by the gas reduction over time. It might also be mindful to make clear that when you're talking about gas boilers, these are legacy gas boilers and we're not building new ones, because I think clearly that hadn't quite come across. We would like to review the NPV hurdle rate, and I will defer to Councillor Dale later to put that in slightly more coherent text for Councillor Moore to have at Cabinet. Mention coordinating with utilities. We noted that obviously the future expansion offers possibilities, so that's something to keep under review, particularly if we do have this legislation laid about requirements to connect and how that might affect. I think the do nothing option to be kept under review, so obviously the more details we have, as Councillor Moore said, the more useful knowing what happens if we don't do this and the risks. And finally, Cambridge Growth Company, can we make sure that they are in the loop for this and being kept informed? So those would be the recommendations I take to Cabinet. Councillor Clough, do you want to add anything or change one?
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure, what I had heard about gas boilers is that, first of all, if you're a customer wanting to connect and you've got residual gas boilers, you'll be allowed to phase those out. Yeah, but also I also heard that we were actually going to have gas boilers to cover the the winter period when the peak load and demand.
Yes, could Ben or other officers or people online confirm whether there are new boilers being built or whether this is entirely legacy to address the peak?
Yeah, I think Jeff covered it only for the first 15 years. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, transitional gas boilers, and then after that, full electrification.
But when you say transitional, do you mean new ones or ones that
Yes.
we already have? Oh, so there would be some new ones.
Yeah, for the peak heating.
Yeah,
Okay.
so when presumably you can buy gas at a cheaper rate and then run it through the system and then, because otherwise the cost of electricity is too high, I guess, is that the point?
Does anyone want a recommendation about that particularly? Do you want to say something about, we're mindful that, well, I suppose we'll put it in the cost versus carbon. I think it just needs to be kept an eye on and reported back.
I don't have a particular view. I just want to make sure I'd understood it correctly, because I understood.
That's fine. Well, I'll retain the recommendations. We need to be keeping on under review the balance of the cost versus the carbon, which I think would cover it. Councillor Griffin, are you happy with that?
Yeah, I'm a little confused though, because I think I heard two different answers about that, whether we're going to have new boilers or not. And
So I think you
just
said that we would use the ones we already have, but there would be a 15-year period where we may need some new provision to cover the peak heat. And at the moment, that is looking, the balance is in favour of the gas because of the cost of swapping to air source or whatever we want to do with the source, ground source. But I'm thinking the recommendation from this committee must be that needs to be kept under review because the balance may change if the price of gas, for example, goes up. So are members comfortable with that going forward as a recommendation, though, that we need to keep that under review? Yeah, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next part, which was other risks, which could include, I think we mentioned planning, dependencies, grid capacity, those kind of things, some of which I know we have touched upon a little bit in the finance. Does anyone have any questions on other risks? I've got Councillor Griffin, Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood.
So I'd like to get an idea of, obviously some trenches will have to be dug. But are these going to be new trenches or can they follow existing utility paths because the more they are new trenches, the higher the risk of archaeological problems. This is Cambridge, really. You put a spade in the ground and you've dug up Roman remains and things like that. So I really do think the archaeological risk is really high if we're going to be digging new trenches. And so I didn't get a sense from reading the thing of how much new excavations are going to be required as opposed to following existing paths, for example.
Yeah. So the answer is we don't know yet, which is why we want to engage with the market to get their expertise to help us assist how much would be new, what the archaeological risk will be, what we can do to coordinate with the other utilities that that exist in the ground and all the work that's going on. Other contractors in other cities have already done this, been through this, and they can bring some expertise. So that's the broad answer. I don't know, Jeff, if you've got anything more specific to add to that.
We're at REBA stage 2, so we're still at a relatively early stage, but we've been doing lots of strategic sort of de-risking, talking to archaeological team, assessing that risk which you've rightly flagged, trying to get a handle on it, and then as we move to what will be REBA stage 3, which is a much more detailed design, we'll then review all of those risks again. So we've had strategic conversations with lots of, sort of statutory consultees. We've got a planning performance agreement that we've been through, looking to really flag any major issues, and so far that there haven't been, and we just know that there's the next level of risk that we're then going to need to mitigate.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood. Councillor Moore, did you want to come back on that point?
Just at the last Cambridge City Climate Leaders, we did have a very brief update from someone from Cambridgeshire County Council on a project that they're doing, starting, I believe, on East Road, Newmarket Road, to look at having all the utilities sort of in one trench. And so it might be helpful for the team to liaise with them that if trenches are being dug, perhaps there could be wider benefits also realised at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood.
Well, I think we've touched on local government reorganisation and the development company as both a risk and a possible, they may be able to help. I was going to ask about things like, UK power networks and grid capacity, and cost overruns. I mean, I've had this position where the solar farm was nothing like as big as it was meant to be because of grid capacity and the local power substation, just couldn't manage it. So to me, almost reading through this, it's more generally, the risks has been the things that I'm interested in because this is such a complex issue, complex project or program. The grid capacity, cost overruns. If you wanted to say more about, and I think other members may want to ask more about local government reorganisation and development company, changes to technology, other external risks like a change in government. Thank you.
There's quite a lot there, but in terms of, the first thing to say is all of those risks have been identified by the project team and also by our potential partners as well, particularly the cost overruns. That's the worry for everybody in terms of that possibility. So what's been happening is we've modelled what might happen if there was a cost overrun. What does it do to the figures? What does it do to billing? What does it do to the equity partners and the risks associated with that? So that's been modelled and reviewed. In terms of the technological change, that's why we've appointed Bureau Happold, who obviously work across the world and have much experience in terms of technology And, you know, technology does move with the times. So it may be that by the time we come back for Cabinet, things have changed. I'll let Bill come in on that. And then the other point related to grid capacity is quite a specific point. And again, it's a bit like trying to pinpoint something that's moving because we know it's in the future. So it's quite difficult, but we're all aware of the grid capacity constraints in a growing city. Bill, do you mind if I bring you in on those 2 points, the grid capacity and technology, please?
Yeah, happy to. So on the UKPN point, we submitted a budget quote to UKPN as part of this process to develop the business case. So that cost and timeline has been factored into the scheme, I think we'll be continuing engagement through the later phases as well to ensure that can be met, and also having more strategic discussions around coordinating with the local area energy plan work that's going on in the area. And then on the technology, in terms of at the moment, kind of heat pump is the sort of primary technology where that has that kind of high technology readiness that's suitable for the area. We looked at alternatives, waste heat supply. Someone mentioned deep geothermal earlier as well, which we did actually engage with a contractor on just to see whether it was possible. But in the local area it wasn't. So we've kind of exhausted those that have that kind of high technology readiness at the moment. And there may be future technologies that become available, and the benefit of having a centralized system like this with centralized energy centers means that it's easier to switch those technologies if something better comes along. I think what we'll likely see is a lot of advancement in heat pump technology as well in future phases.
Thank you very much. If I might just, I would echo that concern about the risks, particularly with river source heat pumps. That's great, but we need an EA licence for it. We've got one at Darwin College coming forward. So just to check that officers are actually learning from these quite innovative developments to make sure that your level of confidence that we will be able to extract from the river. Sorry, and Councillor Clough, do go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get clear in my head when we're talking about trenching. Just how big are the pipes and insulation that you will be putting down in the ground, and how much, is it, what size are we talking about? Because obviously these, once they're down in the ground, they've got to be protected from any other utilities work that goes anywhere near it. I mean, this is, fundamental. I'm no different from a water main, but, what does it look like? What does a pipe plus insulation feel like in terms of size?
Thank you. I fear it may be a little early to answer that, because I think this is what the next bit is going to take forward, but I'll defer to Ben, because we have some vague idea.
I think we must be mindful this isn't a construction project yet. We're some time away from that. But you are right to ask the question, and we've had discussions on trenching, we've had discussions on the risk, the archaeological risk. That level of detail, we're not ready to give you a definitive answer on that. But certainly next time, if we have all the approvals in place and we have all the buy-in that's required, that's the level of detail we can go into.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. So just in summary, I think that we'd be keen to ask Cabinet / the project team to focus on things like risks around the trenches, particularly in a very constrained site, the size, the scope, the potential damage to archaeological assets, and also the fact that any archaeological survey tends to obviously have a time constraint attached to it. That we noted the risks around things like grid capacity, cost overruns, needing the licences for river abstraction, for example. And those are things I think members have for me to say that we would be keen for those to be reported back on very clearly as this project progresses. Is there anything else anyone wants to add? No. Oh, Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood.
Well, I have written down officer capacity.
Yes, good question. Go ahead.
Just as another thing to keep an eye on and the risk, or is it a risk or is it an issue? But either way, making sure we have enough capacity, especially with LGR and the shadow authority coming in.
So you're talking about project team capacity, officer capacity, yeah. So that's very much on the forefront of the council team, and it can't work unless it's adequately resourced. LGR obviously means there is some officer time taken away as well, so we will have to resource adequately. Part of this next step is to make sure we recommend an appropriate team if we go to the next approval. That's been very much an ask of our potential academic partners. You know, how will the team be resourced going forward for what is a complex project? So again, we don't have the answer, but we certainly know that it's something we need to provide some further thought to. There is, it is included in the modelling, but we need to start looking at what level is it in terms of the size of the team and the seniority of the team as it goes forward.
Thank you. I think I would echo that, because obviously your team are also dealing with the Civic Quarter, which is a massive project, and we need to make sure that whatever comes forward is properly resourced, because they're all quite time critical, particularly this one, in terms of potentially getting in ahead of other heat networks that might come forward. So I'll add that to my recommendation. So we have two items left in this area. One was comms strategy, communication strategies. So does anyone have any questions for Councillor Moore or Ben or Lynn about the comms strategy for this?
Just who's doing it now?
So, you say that again, Councillor Davies?
Sorry, forgive me, I was a bit quiet. I don't know. Yeah, sorry, it wasn't meant to be flippant. I suppose it's who's doing it and how, and where do the other partners come in, and is it automatically assumed the City Council will be doing it, or might this be something that one of the other partners might be better at doing?
So there's two elements. One is, you might not call it comms strategy. We think it's very much part of it. The stakeholder engagement strategy is really important, making sure all our potential academic partners and the wider group within the academic partners are kept informed of enough information about the project. That's led by Jeff, our Sustainability Co. We also have a monthly newsletter. Now that goes beyond just from Sustainability Co. Who draft it. That's then checked by our internal comms, in this case Hannah, but also the university comms are also involved as well, just to make sure that, and it's a lot of partners involved in that. Finally, if there's any press release, which also involves multiple communication channels in terms of getting their buy-in as well. So far, the comms has been more focused on stakeholder management rather than any sort of proactive comms. As we go forward, that's going to have to change and be a lot more focused on what the project will entail, particularly when it becomes a construction project, if those approvals are in place.
Thank you. No one else. Oh, Councillor Dale, go ahead. Councillor David, do you want to come back on that, please?
Well, I suppose it's about, sorry, forgive me, but it's the bigger, so that's great, but this is groundbreaking, innovative stuff. And I know it's a balance, because we don't want to set ourselves up and then look daft if it all goes badly wrong. But nonetheless, this, I suspect, this is historic Cambridge leading the way on something that's just going to reduce carbon reduction. It's back to, this is a wonderful project. How are we going to get that right? And should we be going, whoa, or is it about balancing that process?
Yeah, the current approach has been more low-key to ensure we get our stakeholders and partners on board first. They're going through an approval process as we speak. I think the next opportunity where there's genuine step forward is if there's any success, and we hope there will be, on the Green Heat Network grant funding application, because then that's a big tranche of money, and by that time we would expect to have more partners committed to the process, so then we can start being a bit bolder in our comms. Is that not specific enough?
I'd probably pick up a similar point, which is to almost look at the flip side of that, which is, you know, the dangers that there are as well. And, you know, I would agree that, you know, the vision I see is one that's, you know, Cambridge leading the way. But we live in an increasingly kind of polarised society. You often get the kind of the idea of a town and gown divide, and you know, it's the local government serving the universities and that kind of thing that's come up in various other, you know, contentious issues locally. And I guess it's important that, you know, it's engaged early and effectively and solved so that it is that positive vision that people can buy into, and it doesn't become quite a toxic, you know, a negative issue which might undermine the political consensus that we need for such a long-term programme. I know there is limitations on, again, also how we, you know, this is probably a question for Cabinet as the more political members of this. You know, officers have to be a little more careful in that, but I would worry that there's a, yeah, if we don't sell that story, it could become a very negative one that could be a risk in the long term.
Actually, because before you say, I think I would echo that. I think there is a risk here that it potentially becomes a Cambridge University project, for example, and ultimately we in this room are accountable to our residents, and it's worrying me that we don't have a common strategy for residents yet. Obviously there's always a balance because we haven't got that much detail, but the bottom line is on the university's plural websites and on our papers now, we've got pictures of where this is going to go, which residents are looking at, but we haven't told them why. And, you know, I agree with pretty much everyone. This could be, well, it will be, I hope, a really incredibly positive thing, really innovative, but it will stand and fall on the residents supporting it, because that's what we are here and elected to do. And I am concerned that, I understand your point about low key, but we have to involve stakeholders that are residents, that are businesses, who will have concerns now, even if they're not yet, we're not able to answer them. It's selling this as a project that could be really positive for the City Council, can generate us some income like the kit does, but also have these benefits is important, because we may lose that narrative if we don't, as Councillor Davis says, we don't get on top of it soon. Councillor Moore, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that's very helpful feedback. I suppose we have not had a targeted comms strategy other than press releases and updating at points, for example, like when it goes to Cabinet, we have updated people up to now with every stage, but I suppose although it's been so much work has gone into it, and it's been quite a few years now, I can't quite remember how many, but there's still nothing yet sort of concrete for residents to see or feel. And actually the plans for the changes on the old toilet block, they could be something that is where residents are included more in the decision making. But absolutely, no, you disagree. I think that's helpful to have that feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
I think I'm coming from the opposite end, if I'm honest here. I think this is about boldness and not being shy, and actually talking about Cambridge leading the way, which I think is what actually residents do want to hear, not that they're being excluded, but they're part of something that is world leading. And so I think what I'm saying is that we may be in different places, but let's have the debate and see how we go about doing, because I don't think the two are exclusive. If I'm absolutely honest, you can do it safely, you can include residents, you can make sure they're happy, but at the same time, this is about facing the world, and if that's our ambition, we need to be saying that.
Yes, apologies if that didn't come up. That's pretty much what I'm saying as well. This is a really innovative, exciting project, but if we don't tell people that and purely say, here's a map, you know, we should be proud of this. I think even if it's in development stage, this is really innovative. It's something that I think aligns politically with, I hope, everyone in the room's manifestos in terms of what we want to be doing for the city. So yeah, apologies if I didn't get that across, but that was very much where I was coming from. Councillor Dale, did you want to say something?
I was basically going to say the same thing. I'm really agreeing. I'm more just playing the counterfactual. I think we were discussing earlier, and I think the best way to avoid that counterfactual is that positive message. It's also not meant as a criticism, really. I can see how we've got to where we've got to now. It's more, as we now start to move into this period, how we really start to sell it as well.
Can I just come back?
Yes, of
Because
course.
we absolutely are very proud of this project, and I feel that we have been talking about it, but obviously we're missing something. So if you've got suggestions, maybe not now, but of what you think that we should be doing and how we should be targeting residents specifically more than, then let us know.
Does anyone want to? I mean, I suppose I'd say that we are leading on this as a city council, aren't we? We're the majority shareholder.
I suppose my ignorance is who's hearing the message, and so therefore there's a danger, not the first time that I'll speak in ignorance, but the point I'm trying to make is slightly broader than residents. This is about us leading the way, globally. And if that's the case, we don't want to be shy about it. And I think that's the bit I'm trying to work out. How do you get that balance right? Because if you're saying that an old university town is doing this for the people of the city and the city, that's fantastic. And I think public sector can often be very shy about saying, this is actually really important. But as I say, I could be speaking in ignorance, so forgive me.
Thank you. So I'm taking away from that the recommendation to Cabinet and the project team is we do need to be proactive in explaining the benefits, not just in terms of the finances, but obviously the carbon reduction and the fact that this is being undertaken in a city that is constrained. So, it is market leading and potentially world leading, and that it's showing those benefits that will explain to our communities, whether that's business, stakeholders, residents, whatever, what we're doing positively. Is everyone comfortable with that? Thank you very much. We have one last part of... Oh, Councillor Clough, did you want to come in?
I wanted to apologise. I just wanted to check if one of the technical partners, experts, could just tell me whether on page 89 of the business case, where in the map it refers to pipe sizing, where it says pipe sizing DN, is this the answer to the question I was asking earlier?
Yes, that is the internal diameter, so then there's insulation on top of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
And obviously we'll get more detail of that when we move, if this is agreed and we move to the second stage. Thank you. Finally, we move to construction impacts. Now, just to be clear, obviously we don't know how it's going to be constructed. I think this is more about the kind of high level, probably, to be fair, ties into a lot of what we've been saying about the comms strategy as well. Does anyone have any comments or questions on that? Councillor Pounds.
Yes, I think it's a prime case now of, as Lynn will know, learning from our retrofit project, because it started with great intentions. It did hit problems, and the publicity and the feedback from residents became really quite intense. But actually, now it's all in place and it looks lovely and they're nice and warm and comfortable. It's a different story. So the comms and managing expectations and keeping people informed is really, really important. Because once they start going to the press and you get negative press, that sort of thing, then it really spoils it. And we could, given the sort of that we're in a political situation that could change, that's really important because we don't want it to interrupt what you're doing.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, Councillor Dale.
Yeah, I guess on the construction, we're talking a long term. It's a massive report, so apologies if I've missed something. But the impact on the sort of city centre businesses and trade, I've not particularly seen. Is there any plans, considerations, or when will we start to see that? Because I think it's very important that we do, continue to protect what is a really important amenity for both all our residents and the wider area.
So, similar to the Civic Quarter, one of the things that was very important to that project was getting advice from a contractor very early on, and that's the intention with this project, because every developer, every contractor does things differently, we want to minimise disruption, but we do need that expert advice where many of these contractors in the market have done it in other cities, and so there'll be lots of learning from other cities. So is there a plan right now? There isn't a plan. That's part of the commercialisation strategy, and we need to report back on that with contractor input, because otherwise it's really theoretical. We need their expertise to help us develop that plan.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Davey.
This might be a bit detailed, too early question, but I undertook to ask anyway. It's about the scale and the size of the energy, implications for the energy stations. Is it too early? I suspect it is, to know what that will be at the various different energy stations, because I know that would be of interest to certainly some of the council.
Broadly speaking, it is too early. What we do know is we have to engage extensively with the planners. There will be heritage implications to take into account, as well as design implications. So they've got to be in keeping with the local area. I mean, that much is very clear in terms of the feedback from the planners already. What the final product will look like, we're nowhere near that. But we have to approach it with sensitivity, is what I'm trying to convey.
It's really helpful. What again, to feed back to others, what sort of timescale? Presumably that's at least 2 years away.
Well, we would be looking in more detail during the commercialisation. So next time we come to Cabinet, we would expect, if everything plans out as we hope it will, we would expect then to show a lot more detail of those energy centres.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I suppose with my ward councillor hat on, and Councillor Davey as well, it would be very helpful to be keeping ward councillors in the loop. So as soon as we've got indicative massing, those kind of things, because those are the questions I think that can sometimes derail these projects if people have worries or understand that it's going to be bigger than it is or more impactful. So any reassurance would be useful. And I think we covered earlier the liaison with utilities. You know, obviously we've got the big Cadent gas project across, well, the city centre, but actually right out through the arterial roads. It would be very sensible to make sure that we are liaising so that we don't have to dig up the street twice. And I think for me it comes back to that do nothing option as well. Obviously there will be disruption, but also if we didn't do it and colleges did it individually, for example, it might be worth, I suppose, scoping out that the disruption might be worse potentially. So, yeah. Does anyone else have any questions on this? No? Okay, so the recommendations I'll make to Cabinet is we need to make sure we're learning from projects we've already got. So that might be, as Councillor Powell mentions, in Cambridge, and I'm assuming on other projects across the country where we have something similar, that we want to make sure that people are kept informed, and we need to be mindful of the city centre disruption and consider that when reporting back, and the more information, particularly as ward councillors, the better, and the liaison with utilities that we did sort of pick up under one of the others as well, but I think it probably sits here as well. Okay, so can I just draw members' attention to the actual recommendation? So, oh, Ben, would you mind putting your slide up again? That would be very helpful. I mean, Ben also asked, are we as a committee, a cross-party and WIP committee, broadly supportive of applying for the grant? I'm feeling yes. I think it's useful just to feed that back because actually that comes from a cross-party, so I'm very happy to report that to Cabinet. We're also asked to take a view on the release of the 0.6 million from the Council's Climate Change Fund to proceed to next steps, which I'm thinking we don't need to vote on, I'm thinking. Everyone is nodding in agreement. That we're supportive of the project to develop what potentially could be the joint venture, with the model of which is in the paperwork. And, oh yes, and we've covered the grant. So I think Ben and Councillor Moore, you can take back support of the scrutiny committee for those objectives, with obviously the issues that I'll raise in Cabinet. Thank you very much, members. I'm just checking the time as ever the clock isn't working in here. So I suggest we're going to take a 10-minute break, if that's okay, and then we'll move to the next item. Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Can I just say one thing very quickly, because it was noted in the bit about comms that there was perhaps an impression that this was the council serving wealthy city centre colleges, and I just wanted to clarify and be sure that this is a city council project to decarbonise our own city centre buildings. And we're going to be the idea of this project is simply to do it in collaboration with other city centre institutions, which means it's cheaper for us to do it than doing it on our own. There are increased carbon emission savings, and there's the opportunity in the future to extend it to other organisations and maybe residents in the future. So it comes from decarbonising our own buildings, which is our target to be a net zero carbon council, and it fits in with that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to tweak the recommendation to say what we want to shout about is it being a city council project as the primary stakeholder. Thank you. I suggest we'll take a 10-minute break now, which means if we come back at 7:20, please, and then we'll move on to the 3C ICT agenda item. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, and welcome back to the second part of the Performance, Assets and Strategy Committee at Cambridge City Council tonight. So we're now looking at item 6, which is 3C ICT, the Year 1 audit. And we're joined by Jane Wilson, Chief Operating Officer for the City Council, and Simon Oliver, who is Chief Digital Information Officer for the shared service between Cambridge City, South Cambs and Huntingdon councils. We also have Councillor Simon Smith here, who is the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, who also oversees this part of his portfolio. As members would have seen, I did circulate some additional information after lunch today, just talking about the report. We've got the focus really is on the first part of the report, paragraphs 1 to 24, talking about prior to the review, and then paragraphs 25 onwards. Before we get to questions, Jane is going to do a short introduction, just talking about the transition really from the previous concerns, a review a couple of years ago to now, and then she'll hand over to Simon, who's going to give us an update. So, Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Katie. So in my role as Chief Operating Officer, I'm also the Shared Service Director, so I sit and work across the 3C shared services with colleagues in the two authorities. So delivering shared services has got particular challenges and benefits, and I know at this council that you've seen the positives of effectively run shared services. You'll also know this requires knowledge, commitment and expertise on all sides, so that hoped for efficiencies are delivered at the same time as ensuring that services are genuinely shared and responsive. It felt, rightly or wrongly, back in 2024, that we had collectively lost our way with 3C ICT, and the work that led to the TVI report was a difficult but essential process to acknowledge what wasn't working and to agree the recommendation that came to your predecessor committee, which was to continue and reform 3C ICT rather than the more radical option of disbanding it. And for those of you who were at the time, there was a huge amount of work that went in to arriving at that position. And I know at least 2 of you were involved in the subsequent appointment of the CDIO. I'm no expert in ICT and the details, but the difference between then and now for me as the Shared Services Director is huge. Having a Chief Digital and Information Officer has just transformed both the perception and the reality of the service. I talk to Simon, I'd say on average 2 to 3 times a week at least, and we're in really regular dialogue about a whole range of issues. Alex Young, who was recently appointed as Simon's deputy, but is a long-standing member of ICT, is regularly in Mandela, and key pieces of work such as the recent introduction of multi-factor authentication, which has radically improved our cybersecurity, was just much better managed and felt much more integrated. And this change is significantly due to Simon's appointment as the CDO and the way he's been working. But it's also, and I want to acknowledge the positive working relationship between the 3 councils, which is very different to where it was. It's not just at the level of the shared service directors, although I do talk to my colleagues in the other 2 authorities really regularly, but the connections run much further and deeper into our organisations. It makes the service both more engaged and more resilient. We're still very much on a path. I need to acknowledge that. We're not 100% there, and I'll leave that to Simon to talk about in more detail. We have a clear direction of travel, and I think that's what I wanted to just say before handing over to Simon, who joined in December 2024. I think so it was a year after he joined that the audit was carried out by RSM. So thank you, Chair. I hope that was...
Thank you very much, Jen. That's really helpful just to have a bit of context, because not everyone on this committee was involved in the previous decisions, and it's helpful to hear that you feel it's working in a much more positive way now. I'll hand over to Simon Oliver now. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd just like to build on the narrative that Jane has given. So back in 2024, a review was undertaken by an external consultancy to review the state of the IT service, both from technology and operational and resilience, etc. And as a result of that piece of work, a number of recommendations were set for success criteria for the successful service to be reviewed against in a 12-month period. One of the recommendations was the recruitment of a CDIO to undertake that remediation activity. And I joined, as Jane said, in December 2024. I joined the same day that the devolution white paper was released. And I will come back to that because it does set a tone and some reasoning behind some of the things I will discuss. So we've undertaken quite a significant remediation programme over the 12 months, and now is the time to reflect back on that year position. How have we done? Did we achieve the things we did? Did we meet those success criteria? The aims that we were set back in 2024 prior to my appointment. Same report has been taken to all three partner councils, 3C partner councils, so all three scrutinies are seeing the same document set and having the same conversations, and I will correlate those in the background. So essentially, to assess the service, 3 pieces of work have been done that have been culminated to get a position. The first is that we've undertaken an officer satisfaction survey. This is a repeat of the survey that was undertaken in 2024 with the same questions, so we could do a like-by-like comparator of the service. It should be noted that the number of respondents to that survey was significantly lower than in 2024. However, I believe that is because at the time of the first survey, there was a lot of angst for the IT service, and there was a lot of pressure or a lot of desire from the leadership, etc., to make sure your voice is heard, make sure. And so I think the level of engagement has naturally dropped off because the level of dissatisfaction is also dropped off. You'll notice that for some areas, particularly with Huntingdonshire, some of the scores are lower than they were previously. The reason for that is I banned the 3C ICT service from responding to the survey. So as a result, you had 80 less positive results who all thought the IT service was in a good place. So this is a truer reflection on officer opinion than perhaps it was before. I'm pleased to say across all the questions we've had an improvement. One of the success criteria that was set was a 10% improvement in customer satisfaction overall, and we've hit a 13%. Though for each question, officers were asked, could you give a written response why you gave that answer? And were also asked to give their top 3 areas of concern or priorities. And so my team have been through every single written response, and we discovered a number of themes, which I'll come back to in a moment. So there are some areas of concern, and I'll explain why I'm going through those. The second bit of evidence utilised was what we call a CDIO 360. Effectively, key members of the leadership team of all 3 councils, that's chief exec, 2 directors, including the directors responsible for the service, transformation leads, were asked their opinion on the success of the introduction of the CDIO role itself, and then the performance of the CDIO as a post holder. So that has produced a set of outcomes regarding that success, etc., etc., which I can go into, but that's referenced as well. Then the third bit of evidence is the internal audit that was undertaken by Huntingdonshire's internal audit partner, RSM, which was to look at the success of that remediation programme in a year. It is accepted that the format of Huntingdonshire's internal audit is not one that you would recognise. A similar response was received from South Cambridgeshire. It's just, that's the nature of the way HDC do it. I wanted to share it in its raw format so you saw it, but I do accept that it's difficult language, difficult, so hence why the cover report hopefully brings that a bit more to life. effectively, what the report acknowledges is that the determination of the scale of remediation work necessary from the external consultancy to the level of remediation work that I determined was necessary in February was of a significant different magnitude, a magnitude of 4 to 5 times in terms of activity, simply because I had the time to go on and look at it, and I wanted to bring it to my ambition. We've undertaken that remediation programme for the same budget, and we're under budget that was originally set. So whilst we've increased the ambition, actually we haven't increased the price of doing so. So I would say, colloquially, I would give myself and my team a 7 out of 10 rating on that year, but a 7 out of 10 rating on 4 to 5 times more ambition is probably a 30 out of 10 on the original requirements. So there is more to do. We haven't achieved everything that we said we would do. So there is some residual work that needs to be undertaken. The auditor's recommendation is that for both the activity under the remediation programme that hasn't been completed, plus the findings of the feedback from the officers' survey, should form 2 new programmes of work that are detailed and tracked with dates and held to account, because that traditionally is what an auditor would expect to do. But I'm asking all 3 councils to accept a different approach. First thing that's key for me is I want to lose the term remediation from the ICT service. We accept that we're not exactly where we need to be and there's more to do, but I think officers having the remediation tag hanging over them for longer than is necessary demotivates, and I actually think it devalues the superb work the team has done. So I'm proposing that instead we move the work that's left to do into effectively 3 different work streams. First is for things like we've still got some restructuring to do, some changes to roles and responsibilities. To me, that is a business as usual activity. It's just something that services do at the right time to go forward. I don't see why it is beneficial for us to force ourselves to a set of artificial dates to meet a need. That's just something we will do as a proper service going forward. The second element is things which are operationally within the ICT services remit. So, as an example, we, from that feedback we've had from the officers' survey, we have created a customer experience programme. We've acknowledged where the issues are. We are going to go to each council, to the town halls, their all staff sessions, and show them what we've heard. We're going to show them what we've done. We're going to explain what we're doing, and a number of activities have already happened that have already started to improve matters. And then we will do another survey, but one that's actually targeted to the customer. How does it feel? Have we done? Have we listened, etc. And I think that would be a much better test of whether we're now meeting needs and moving forward than a programme that's at the back. And the last area I want to move things into is we are moving into a much stronger LGR focus. And so where we've got activity that aids LGR readiness, transition readiness, I want to put that into an LGR programme now and properly. So quite a lot of the activity we added into the remediation programme really was, we know LGR's coming, so let's get that in and do things that we need to do to be ahead of the curve. So again, I don't think it's remediation, I think it's proactive work and we should make it in that vein. So overall, we've had a year of intense activity. We've improved much of the IT estate, the way of operating. The particular improvement is around communications, confidence and trust. There's an openness and a transparency to IT that's been missing, which I think was actually the most good. And the fact that myself and Jane are sat here side by side, you know, positive relationships. If you look back to how things were in 2024, I think that is astonishing. I think it's a real success. So I'm happy to take questions on the report, happy to take questions on where we need to be. What I would say is any questions around the IT arena, I'm more than happy to answer. But anything around the CBIO as a post holder or a role, I'd push forward to Jane because it'll be a bit rich for me to answer questions about my own performance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to sum up, in effect, what you're asking scrutiny particularly to look at is obviously whether we're supportive of the new structure, which is partly what Jane covered and what you've mentioned, that you, rather than doing a new big work stream, again, you're asking for us to consent or indicate our support to this idea of removing the remediation tag and instead moving this into new work streams, one of which would be restructuring as just part of a normal restructuring that every manager should be looking at every year, I suppose. You want to continue with the showing staff, the town halls, the surveys, so those are the users within the councils. And you want to create, in effect, a new work stream about LGR programming, which is a little bit more proactive. So I think probably scrutiny might want to reflect when we're asking questions if those are the areas we think we would be minded to support. But obviously I'm happy to take other questions. And Jane, do add something if I forgot something.
No, you haven't. It's my fault. I should have mentioned it at the beginning. When this came for scrutiny as the decision to go through to this process, this commitment, there was at that point we did not know that LGR was going to be announced, and there was the purpose of this review was really at this point to go, do we want to continue, or are we going to revert and look at one of the other options? I would say that that's become much less of something that we actually want to explore right now, because with LGR there's some bigger issues, but just from my perspective, I don't think it's as much of a necessary question for you to tackle, but I just didn't want to leave it hanging because it was something as part of the approval Simon gave. Yeah.
And certainly when it came to strategy and resources, it was agreed that keeping the service together was the better thing. So I don't think we're necessarily being asked to take a view on that unless anyone has a very strong view. Does anyone want to kick off questions? Councillor Griffin.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Simon. I remember all too well the situation we were in back in 2024, and I think you've done an extraordinary job. So that's great. I have one clarification. Just this ICT satisfaction survey and the 360-degree satisfaction report, those are two different reports, right? Okay, because the RSM slides seem to indicate they're the same. I don't know if you noticed that. On the bottom of slide 4, that's the agenda pack, page 234, they seem to conflate the two. And I was really confused about that until I realized. Am I correct about that?
There are two separate surveys. One's an officer survey via a questionnaire. The other was a questionnaire followed by an interview. The 360 was that question, then interview. They are separate. The reason they get conflated, unfortunately, is that there's common themes through. And so the auditors have conflated the themes, which is unhelpful. But you're right, they are separate and different audiences.
That's what I thought. And do we see the 360-degree report? Is that included here somewhere, or did I miss it?
It hasn't been included. So at the end of the report, I bring out some key findings and some quotes from that report. It was a report that was shared with all of the 3C service directors. So it has been reviewed, And also, I also should say, is I report quarterly formally to a 3C Shared Services Board, so I'm also tracked at that as well. So they have seen it, they've reviewed it, highlights came through. Because it's quite personal to an officer, is that the right thing to bring to a scrutiny committee?
That's what I thought. Okay. So it says on, this is again on that consultant's report, it says that collaborative, these are accomplishments, accomplishments that have been made. It says collaborative digital leadership complete, and it says CSIP improvement actions complete. I just want to know, like, what does that mean exactly? Concretely, what does that mean in terms of day-to-day work and so on?
Sure. So, as well as the activities that were uncovered, recommended by the external consultancy, we also had a number of what we call CSIPs, so they're improvement activities that are necessary, continual service improvement project. And so we had a significant number of things that we should fix in a big list. When we created the remediation program, we brought them all together into one. And then what we've done as part of the assessment is go back to that original list and go through and say, have they been achieved? So the scale of them differs. You know, some are quite quick and easy, some are much more complex. But a lot of it's around frustration of the service desk, for example. When I call, do I get the phone answered? Do I get my first time fix? I'm on my way. Do I need to call the service desk? You know, can I self-help or etc. So we went through a number of those to bring that up. Some of it's process, some of it's customer experience, some of it's frustrations with technology. So essentially, it was a list of service improvements that we should have made that have been on a list hanging around for a long time.
Thank you very much. Councillor David was next, I think, and then Councillor Clough. Okay, go ahead, Councillor David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming. I have to own up here, I've got some history in this. When I was doing Simon's job in 2023, with Heather Jones, we identified there was major problems in how we related to 3CICT, and Simon has taken that forward subsequently, and I'm delighted that there was a review in 24. So I'm really pleased that there's been work done. There are one or two buts, I have to say, and you alluded to it earlier in your presentation. The way the report's written, I couldn't work out that it was the audit, because at times it looked like you'd written a report saying how good you were. And that, I'm sure that wasn't the intention, but nonetheless, it was quite off-putting, and therefore you almost had to work your way through. And it's only today that we found out that it's actually been lifted from the audit report, which means, again, it kind of immediately not raised the hackles, but the issue for me straight away is that Tim's alluded to, the statements there without evidence, and that makes it problematic. Therefore, as a scrutiny committee, we'd like to have seen the evidence, because I have absolutely no doubt, from talking to Jane and others, that the situation is vastly improved on what it was. So please take these comments in retrospect, but the outcomes are what we'd like to have heard more about, rather than just statements saying we're good and this is why we're good. And I think that for the report, the way it's written, is problematic. All those riders, as I say, there's two questions I've got, and unusually for me, I've gone into detail. Page 238, which is about comes out of the detailed findings action. The third bullet point, effective joint governance is in progress, and with governance restructure and apportionment methodology not yet fully implemented. Now, why I've gone to that is because that's where this process actually commenced, i.e., how is the governance working? Is it working effectively? And oddly enough, you just started to allude to how you fit into the shared services project, how you and 3CICT are therefore now managed. And that's linked to the financial tables that come, I think, a bit later on, but which tells me about what it is now rather than how it's changed. And again, if you could say a wee bit about the governance process, how that works. I'm delighted you and Jamie every week, that's fantastic, but how are you governed and how does that fit into the City Council? And secondly, how do the finances work and how has that changed over the last 3 years? Thank you, Simon.
So in terms of governance, I have an ongoing relationship with the 3 service directors. So that is on a ad hoc and continual basis. There's a continual feedback loop of issues, resolutions, things we're putting in place. So there's a regular ongoing dialogue. I want to make that very clear. We don't wait for a meeting to happen in 3 months' time. It's an ongoing relationship between the 3. And we triangulate between the 3 as well, so which has never happened historically. On a formal basis, I report quarterly into the Shared Services Board. I report on the finances, the key activities, the KPIs that we have in place. We are bringing some new KPIs on board in the new financial year because the existing ones are all green, not exactly representative perhaps of, so we're changing those to be more representative. So it's a much more open and transparent way of working. That's a formal way of reporting. The other thing that we've done is we've changed the way that we interact with the change portfolios. So what used to happen is the councils would send all of their projects, thoughts, ideas into 3CICT, and we would pick some up, some would get lost in the other. It just didn't work. So what we've done, we've established a new governance structure for change delivery so that each of the council's transformation leads, PMO leads, depending on how you transfer them, we meet with them monthly. You see each other's prioritised list of activities, so you can see what each other's doing, which is really handy for shall we work together. You see the feedback from our performance, so it's open and you can discuss it together. We are moving to a much better model of being able to demonstrate where resources is being used against which council and which activities. So it's a much better view of apportionment. It also means you can have much better conversations around your XYZ team seems to have been predominantly Council A. So as we move through the prioritisation joint going forward, we want to make sure that that's shared appropriately because so that change delivery funnel into the team. You also now see our internal projects, so things like the customer experience project, the LGR work, that's now shared openly, whereas before that was behind closed doors. In terms of finances, we are much better now at the scrutiny of apportionment than we ever have been before, very open and transparent. Whilst the IT budgets have remained static from an operational perspective, what you actually receive for the same amount of money is increasing. And we can demonstrate that there's actually real improvement in terms of bang for buck that you've got. But what we haven't done is returned a saving. As a service that's in remediation, we're trying to utilise the money that we're able to recoup back into the service to ensure we're self-funding that improvement journey.
That's really helpful, and I wonder if this might actually be a question for Jane rather than yourself. So if, and I suspect it's been a journey over the last couple of years, this is £3 million of the City Council's budget, which is not an insignificant chunk. So if there's issues, where would you feed those in, James? Is it through Simon and then to this committee or through to Cabinet? Would that be the process that we would adopt if there were? Thankfully, there aren't. But how is the reporting now taken as a result? Because again, I go back to the issues 2 years ago, 3 years ago, were all about governance. And I just wanted to make sure that we've cracked that one now.
Thank you. And yes, I didn't actually recognise the characterisation of governance restructure not being fully implemented. I thought we had, but you know that's what's in this report. It sits in my budget area, so I have that visibility. I report if there's an issue, I'm going straight to my cabinet member on it. It would come here. It's also within the quarterly performance report, so it would come. You would see it anyway. So it's very visible now.
The reason for that culpable, and I was culpable, with shared services, you'd think, so, well, it's over there. And there wasn't an accountability, there wasn't responsibility, and it's as much to do with how we operate as it is to do with how HDC operate. And I think that's why the governance and the finance have become so important. To go back to my last question, though, about money, do you feel that that's now, I hear what you say about it's all, well, it's sorted is what I think you're saying, but or is it actually that it's more visible rather than it's sorted?
We did do a very significant piece of cost reapportionment work before Simon came into post, and it was on the basis of that work that we'd already done that Simon picked up the service. So we already started from a much better place. But what we're seeing is actually we are, I think in the latest report, which was on Monday, we are underspent. So there's a much clearer understanding, and it's not a huge amount, but there is good accounting happening, which is excellent from my point of view.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Sam.
I think we had Councillor Clough, Councillor Shield, Councillor Gawthorpe Wood, please. Councillor Clough, go ahead.
I have to say I got the same experience when I read the report. I'm grateful to Councillor David to say that those are actually audit report statements, so fine. But again, I'm not sure I really can get a sense of, you know, how many systems are you looking after and whether each of these systems is getting a decent service and how many tickets are being put in for the system. So frankly, some sort of lists and some good old spreadsheets would be useful to give a sense of what's actually going on, because at the moment I've got no sense of how the users or indeed people outside residents are getting what value they're getting, what quality of service they're getting. So I think the providing more information so we can actually glance down and see what's going on, and having some you know, RAG ratings might be useful. So I would ask if that could be something that's looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if that's a Simon or a Jane question, or whether that relates to the KPIs, which I think you did say this is coming forward on the regular KPI updates. I think you said, Jane, is that correct?
Because this is largely an internally facing service, it is one that we pick up at the Shared Services Directors Board. So quarterly they are looked at, we consider them. If you wanted us to consider what, you know, and there are a large number of systems that are supported, so there's an element of how much would you see the wood from the trees if we provided you with everything that the service runs? So I suppose my question would be, what is it exactly that you want to know? And then we can look at how we bring that to you, because there is a huge amount, and believe me, I spent months of my life working through the detail a couple of years ago.
Are members suggesting that, for example, we would want to see where something wasn't working, i.e. the kind of things we'd want to scrutinise, or are members, I'm happy to take views.
Sorry, it's back to the balance again. So we spent an awful lot of time looking, so I'll just pluck out of the air toilets, right? Now, how much do we spend each year on toilets as opposed to ICT? Okay, so the point, it's about trying to rebalance priorities in terms of financial spend, and so therefore there's something about how we're able to monitor, picking up Hugh's point, how we're able to monitor that and effectively without it being, as you say, 100 pages on, you know, the spreadsheet that was used by, and the other bit in that is, I think, which I suspect might come out later, is it's not about staff, it's actually about residents and about resident satisfaction in using, sorry, now I'm starting to ramble, I'll stop. But it's about residents being the key satisfaction person rather than staff, I think. But again, it's how do you then because they've got to be able to use the thing to report. Anyway, I'll stop.
Thank you. Yeah, hold that thought, Councillor Davey, because I certainly want to ask something about that, and I'll see, we'll maybe come back to that. Councillor Shield.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jane. I wonder if it would be okay for me to divide into two chunks. I've got 4 just clarificatory things and then 2 general things. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead. If you can be as brief as you can be, that would be appreciated,
Okay.
but go ahead.
Thank you very much. So, Simon, there's lots to think about in this report, and thank you very much for everything that's gone into it. I'll start with my 4 purely clarificatory things. On page 229, paragraph 49, read, a particular success over the past year has been the significant uplift in the relationship between the councils and the 3C ICT shared service. And this is the bit that I'm wanting to try and get a bit more clarity on. It says, this has been driven by a change in the individuals, a new CDIO, and a reset of the intelligent client function to the Chief Operating Officer, along with more open and transparent approach to service remediation. So I think the bit that I'm a little bit cloudy on is the bit where it says a reset of the intelligent client function to the Chief Operating Officer. So that's my first one on 229. On 233, sorry. It's the phrase measurable gains in user sentiment across key service attributes. And I think that I sort of 3/4 follow what that means, but maybe if you could just unfog my brain a little bit on that one. So that's 233. Then 234. It's this sentence, which, and maybe this isn't just clarificatory, this is maybe, would like to know your thoughts. It says, the operating model uplift is incomplete, with delays in recruitment sustaining a single point dependency on the CDIO. So I'm wondering if you could unpack that, Simon, again a little bit for me. And also, this is the non-clarificatory bit, is it something we should worry about, this sustaining a single point dependency on the CDIO? Do we need to worry? And then the last of the 4 clarificatory points, it was just about the phrase is on page 238, and I will give you the context. Sorry, I'll give you the context. Give you your patience. Yes, it's the sentence, the CDIO role has strengthened delivery discipline in reworking these outcomes into a 3-way framework, and you kindly explained the 3-way framework, Simon, already, and a revised timeline, detailed initiatives and budgeted streams, which has improved transparency of sequencing and dependencies. And I wondered if it was dependencies in the sense of knock-on effect or ripple effects throughout service functions, for example, but I didn't really quite know what the sequencing bit was to do with. So I'm gonna stop talking now, because that's my clarificatory bits, and the other things is more general. Maybe if I just stop.
Yes, I think it comes back to some of the points that the audit report is perhaps not in the most accessible language. Thank you.
No problem. I'll take those in order. So in terms of that, the context of the relationships, in the service agreement, the 3C service agreement, each council nominates an intelligent client that is responsible for the relationship, the management, the assurance of the 3C service. I refer to that as a service director, because it's the way that it goes. So if you hear me say service director, it's intelligent client. When I arrived, the intelligent client, the responsible day-to-day officer for ICT, I felt was too junior within the organisation. So it got involved in operational matters, but didn't deal with the more strategic, financial, governance, the sorts of conversations we needed, because everything was down to the operational IT and the tin and wires, as I would call it. The reset of that relationship partly was for Jane took on the service director role, the intelligent client role, lifted it into a much more strategic conversation. We were able to have a much more open dialogue, and we both had the seniority to take on actions on each other's organisation's behalf and make things happen, and that maturity enabled us to move forward. So that reset of Jane becoming the intelligent client service director had a massive improvement and an uplift, and that has been a key part of the success of the relationship reset. The attributes it talks about in the service in the survey is simply across the 15 to 18 questions that are comparable. All of those have improved. It is simply an auditor's way of saying across the board there has been an improvement to a greater or lesser extent, but there has been an improvement across the board. In terms of the operating model, in this context, it means the structure of the IT service. So when I arrived, my predecessor was at a much lower level. You know, I'm a chief officer at each of the partner councils as well as the service, and so they were very operational again. So by enabling me to come into a higher level, much more strategic, much more how do we solve the key problems, having the real conversations that are needed. And there were some really tough conversations early on where I had to hold the mirror up and say, hang on, some of this isn't now all on us, some of this is some behaviours and reactions. And so, so that was so in the restructure, we haven't completed it yet. So we are currently out for recruitment for a number of roles. They're happening next week. If we're successful, that means I will have the deputies in place that I can delegate to, which gives me the freedom to focus more on LGR and get out of the more operational matters. But also at the moment, or prior to Alex being promoted in recognition of his good work, it meant there wasn't a natural second in command. So if I wasn't here, there was no deputy, there was no succession planning. Now we have Alex as second in command, and we're bringing in 2 or 3 extra roles into the leadership team. That will enable us to have that. And you know, if I wasn't here, those roles were covered in a much better way.
So the single point dependency is coming to an end. Yeah. Yes. It has been a problem, but it won't be going to.
And it will enable me to focus on other matters. At the moment, I'm across too many subjects. And in terms of dependencies, this is both in terms of your own ambitions. So your change programme, we want to do something with X, Y and Z in this service. And we can go, hang on, we're going to need to do A, B, C on the IT side to enable that to happen and make that clear so we can, as we produce our work plans, you can see when that's going to happen so you have confidence when you can pick up the baton. When we talked about the number of systems, this is where life gets a little complicated. So for some of your IT systems, particularly your operational, your back office systems, ICT is completely in charge of. We run it on your behalf. It's all down to us. It goes wrong, it's on us. Many of your line of business systems are chosen by the service areas, and the service areas determine what systems they utilise and how they're utilised. So we will offer advice. I would say now you get a much better quality advice than you've had historically, but they have been historically able to do their own thing. The other thing in all of this is we're now in this internet-connected world, and the bit between us and some of your systems is not within our control or your control. it's across the internet. So when you look at that complexity of some things are managed and owned within services, some are within IT, we have a plethora of service contracts. It's a real complicated picture. So one of the things that the reason about that dialogue is really important, and the transparency, is historically everything's 3C ICT's fault. It's ICT. What we're able to do now is go, right, let's look end to end, who's responsible for what, where's it fallen down, what are we going to do to fix it? So if there was a problem with the equipment here in the chamber, I'm sure you'd all go, damn IT. We have little to do with it. And it's that's the complicated. So we manage that complexity, we talk it through, we all take ownership of our bits, but what's happened is every time we hit a challenge, we're open about it, we talk it through, we both reflect, we both change. It's not all, it's somebody's fault. So when I talk about dependencies, it's understanding the complexity of the IT arena, which is difficult, but also the relationships and our change projects and all the moving parts. But by being open and you've been able to see it, people can understand it and react, and it's not the black box that it once was there.
Thank you very much. It's very useful. I'm very mindful of time. We're about 20 minutes left and 3 bits to get through, so be very grateful for very concise questions, please.
Thank you. So that's really helpful, Simon. And Jane, thank you. I'll just go on to my 2 general points, which won't take as long. Simon, you've pointed out yourself, both in the report and in your presentation, that the rate of take-up does seem low. However, I do take on board your point that that may be a reflection of increased satisfaction. I am just mindful that 6%, 7%, 13%, that does feel like not quite enough participation to feel really confident that we know where we're going. Is there more that we should be doing in terms of encouraging participation? And also, was there a mechanism to provide longhand feedback beyond the multiple choice? I'm aware that there was in the context of the 360 interviews, but for the rank and file officers, I wonder, was there that option? And then last but not least, when we received these reports, I was thinking, oh, a lady phoned me on Friday, just gone, to say, I can't work out how to get response on a council tax benefit query. And so I walked her through the website, and she said, oh yeah, I have been there, but it's all web forms, and they don't give you what you don't see straight away what you've sent, what you said, and when you said it. When I started reading the papers today, I was thinking it'd be an opportunity to talk about the experience of the resident in the community. But then, of course, it dawned on me that this is it's a review of internal systems. And so I'm kind of building on Councillor Mike Davies' point. I think asking services is important and good, but are we also measuring how well they are measuring the most important form of customer satisfaction, i.e. out in the community? Or is it that last very small box in the table of KPIs is where that comes in? And look, I understand and accept if you tell me we can only do one thing at a time. This is about internal systems. Outfacing has to be a different focus for a different day, but let's please just keep in mind the importance of the outfacing. Spare a thought for the outfacing side and for my lady telephoning me on Friday.
Thank you,
asking
Councillor
for
Shield.
guidance.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just
I'm wrapping up anyway. Was my voice telling you that I was wrapping up? I hope so. So
Thank you.
no need to clip me off because I'm winding down.
Thank you very much, much appreciated. And just to add, I think something for us, I would like Jane and Simon to think about taking forward is that resident involvement. Because actually, although you're a back office service in inverted commas, if this fails for our residents, there are systems that are life supporting, finance supporting, and also being able to contact yourselves and us. So I think that's something probably in future, probably fair to say we'd welcome a little bit more focus on. And I think Councillor Gawthwaite-Wood, you had a question.
Okay, well, I'm looking on page 268 at the future KPIs. I mean, I'm thinking, first of all, before I start, I do want to say thank you for setting the context of all of this, and actually it's extremely useful to understand a bit better about who owns which systems, who owns which applications, and my background was doing something similar at ONS. So, but I'm wondering how we can turn what we've discussed here into something that we can see the outcomes and have KPIs as part of the quarterly report. Now, I did raise this question last year at SNR, and you said you'd be working on suitable KPIs. So I just want to leave that with you. We need to think about what it is we want to see, but we want to see it in terms of outcomes, in terms of improvements, and also you mentioned risks, and risks perhaps to certain systems. But of course, it's from very much a user perspective where we're not getting into the innards and the details of the system. So I'm not quite sure all applications. So I just want to have a think about that. I think we need to have a think about this, maybe take this offline. But I'm also slightly concerned that we have got different parts of the council who are buying new IT applications that may be off-the-shelf ones and how they'll fit in the future and the risk around that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Simon.
If I may, I'll answer that. So there are two parts to this which we're conflating. So there's my role as the lead for the 3C ICT service, the tin and the wires, keeping things operational and running, and when things go wrong, we get it fixed fast. The second part of my role is as your CDIO, okay? I'm a chief officer of the council. I am your CDIO. I'm not another council CDIO. I don't work for 3C. I'm your CDIO. And Jane will point me in the direction of where she feels I will provide the most value, bang for buck, to support you. So whilst I talk about, from an operational IT, many of those web forms, etc., aren't the responsibility of my team. We act under your direction, etc., You're the lead for them. On a strategic perspective, i.e., what's the direction of travel? What should we be buying? What's the recommendation? Where's the vendor market going? What's going to give us the most value? You know, all of that. Don't get down any technical cul-de-sacs. Make sure we don't know. That is where I also add value. So I'll bring it to life, if I may, and Jane maybe wants to pick this up. Is there's been a view historically that when the IT doesn't work, what we must do is buy some new IT because the old IT didn't work. Then you tended to buy the new IT based on what you used to do. It was a very strange way of working. It's not unusual. What we've done now is I've come in and I've looked at helping understand the root causes, utilising my experience of vendor management, of contracts, to how do we maximise your spent cost in and avoid the cost of replacements, etc., And in the LGR world, where there's minimal ROIs at the moment to an uncertain future, and some of the timescales to change are beyond where we are in terms of timescales before investment day, that is giving real value and bang for buck and improvement now that you probably wouldn't have got in other words. And I'm happy to pass to Jane to explain, to front that up. But I want to be clear, I don't just do tin and wires and keep things going. There is good quality professional advice based on many years of doing this that you have at your disposal that you didn't have. And that's what the 360 review was really there to show and to bring in, that the CDO role had brought value and you were getting bang for buck from that appointment.
Thank you very much. Jane, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, if I can. pre the review that we went through, we had got into a place where individual services were specifying and buying IT systems without having the level of advice and support they really needed, because we didn't have in-house ITC capacity at a strategic level, and the then 3CICT service frankly didn't have it either, or didn't see it as its job. So the way I put it is that we would go to them and say, well, we want to do this thing, is this the right thing to buy? And they'd look at it and say, well, it'll drive on the road. So, you know, you end up with something that will work, but is it any good for what you actually wanted? Quite possibly not. So we're still struggling with some of that legacy. A lot of our systems don't talk to each other. We're working through what that means for us. But what Simon's been able to bring in is the capacity to look at systems that we've already bought and gone, you're not actually using them to their full capacity. They can do a lot more for you. They can do a lot more for you for free, and supporting that work. And that's been right across from everything from the Microsoft services through to a number of our systems that we use. And the thing not to do is to look at an expensive replacement, particularly given that we've got LGR coming, because there will come a point where we need to just accept we've got what we've got and we have to get through to the other side.
Yeah.
But I think the big strategic difference is we have stopped buying things that aren't really what we need. And that there is a real plug-in between ICT and procurement as well. So there's a sort of a block, procurement knowing to go and talk to ICT, and that is making a real difference to how we are operating. I should just say on the website side, our website is not the responsibility of 3CICT. I am hearing what you are saying, and I am going to take that away and look at how we properly bring that back to you. But it isn't one that sits with 3CICT.
That's the point I think we're making, that if there are things scrutiny you think could be picked up, we can maybe talk to Jane offline about that. I think Councillor Jane...
Chair, can I just chase my
apologies,
questions,
yes.
my two questions, which is just to remind you, increasing participation in the main survey, and was there a longhand option for those rank and file officers? And I think Jane has possibly just answered my question of my lady who wants to be able to email the City Council just like in the good old days. What do I go back and tell her? Jane, I think you're saying, well, at the moment, that's not under this.
But we could suggest that it's looked at. Thank you. Yeah, which I'm seeing nodding about perhaps some discussion with Jane and then obviously Simon as a partner as to whether those kind of resident engagement interfaces, for want of a better word, might need to be part of something we review subject to LGR. I think we had Councillor Davey and Councillor Dale.
Given we've got 7 minutes left, my question is going to be quite blunt.
Participation question, increasing the number of people joining in the survey.
I'll be quick. So the survey that we sent out was predetermined by the survey we sent out previously, so we had to have the same questions to give you the like for like. We asked everybody to write a response as to why they gave that, and also their top 3 problems, so we have a written response. After every single support call, we ask people to give us feedback. I read every single one of those messages of feedback, so I know exactly what's coming back. We've got a customer experience programme that we're running on the back of the feedback from the officer survey. We will go out to officers and we will go out and say, have we done this? Have we cracked it? And we will really encourage them, because we're not asking them to do, we're not asking them to do a survey because we want to get a view. It is, has your world changed for the positive based on the things you've told us?
I hope that reassures you, Councillor Shield.
Thank you, Simon. That is really helpful.
Councillor Davey, briefly, hopefully. As you kindly said.
It's a brief question. You've spoken in the report about LGR, you've spoken in the meeting about LGR, bearing in mind that Hunts will in no way, shape or form under any of the four proposals be anything to do with Cambridge and South Cambs after 2028. I'd be interested to know what it is about LGR you're involved in and how that discussion takes place. Presumably it's about processes post-28 when Hunts won't be with this authority in the south? Because that's the one model that can't possibly be happening.
So what we have in regionally, we have a set of work streams that have been with a chief exec of each work stream. So we have an IT, digital and customer service work stream. I represent the 3 partner councils for IC Digital. We have, have other people who come in, such as Jane, to support the customer services. So City have myself and Jane on that work stream, and we'll be bringing other colleagues in. What I am doing is doing the discovery piece around how are the other councils designed? How are they built? What's good? What's bad? I'm building the relationships up with those parts. We have difficult people from different parts, different views. Ask 5 IT people a question, you'll get 5 different answers. Getting through all of that, so we have a wealth of information so that when we know which option is selected, and let's be faced, there's some options which are more likely than others, so they have more focus, we can determine in each of those scenarios which is the most practical or ambitious or option available to you.
I think given the situation with LGRs, obviously we don't know yet, would it be reasonable, Councillor Davey, to suggest that perhaps we ask Simon and Jane to bring something back when we have some more detail? Because like you, I think we really do need to make sure, due diligence, that this is happening properly.
I think that's great. I was aware of the work stream that Simon's referred to. The problem I'm alluding to is that all 4 proposals, none includes Huntingdonshire being involved with South Cambs and Cambridge, and therefore that clearly skews it a bit. And so therefore it's intriguing and purely parochial from the Cambridge City Council. How's that playing out?
Yeah.
Given lack of time, that can come.
Yeah, and I think certainly one of my recommendations is that we do have an update on LGR when you have some more concrete things to provide. Councillor Dale.
I'll be very quick, but to go back to, I guess, initial points from other members, it's very welcoming to see improvements, and that is very clear within this. I think also picking up on other points people have raised, I maybe wouldn't put too much dependence on, on very low returns on in surveys, but I guess a point you'll take forward is it'd be interesting to see really the KPIs that probably, not that we need to see them in detail, but just that, presumably Jane and Councillor Smith should be able to see, at a top level, and we should know that process is ongoing. So it'd be good to see that. And I think the other question that was raised was around removing the sort of terms around remediation, etc. And I think if the, senior leaders like Jane are supportive of that, I am. I get the point. I think it looks like there's a good message there, and if that's going to improve outcomes for the team, then I'd be willing to support it.
Thank you very much. I think if that ends that particular one, just to sum up, I'm happy, I think I'm right in saying that we are supportive of your request that you take forward these new work streams and you remove the remediation tag. I think we noted succession planning is obviously really positive. You don't want a key point of failure to be any member of staff. And I think we also mentioned that in the future it would be useful to have information about systems that maybe weren't working, rather than having a massive spreadsheet of everything, particularly resident engagement and how your service engages, because that's certainly, I think that's less apparent than perhaps some of our other shared services. That audit reports in future, we might need to think about how they're phrased, and that an LGR update would be welcome, obviously, when we have some concrete information about who's going with whom and what the systems would be. Are members happy with all of that? We are quite tight on time. We can extend slightly, but we now move to the cybersecurity update. To be honest, my reading of that is there's not a huge amount to say. I'm not proposing necessarily to ask Simon to do an update on that. Do members, time-wise, have any questions on that? Which is on page 271. I think we're noting that it's rated amber on the risk register. The question I had was obviously to officers, are you confident this is robust enough, given the risks of our system going down, or systems across the 3 counties? But obviously, if members have other things, please do jump in.
If you're looking for a cast iron guarantee, I can't give you it. I was the IT director of a local authority that was hit by malware. It was very impactful in terms of delivering services and in terms of cost and also reputation. On the back of that, we got recommendations or accommodations from both the Cybercrime Unit, the ICO, and the National Cyber Security Centre that we had done everything right, everything that we'd done in place, all our measures, what we do in the event of a breach were absolutely bang on the money, and we still got hit. What I will say to you is we have made sensible investments in the last year. We have put in new risk profiling, and you are in a much stronger position now, particularly with the implementation of things like a multi-factor authentication, than you have been before. And my commitment to you in the paper is I will continue that investment and activities to improve. One of which is at the moment you rely on an internal IT system, personnel. We are looking to bring in a 24/7, 365 managed service whereby somebody is constantly looking at vulnerabilities and making recommendations, constantly looking for anybody who is undertaking any various activities that can respond. And in the event of a breach, we have people right on there who can respond and minimise the impact of anything happening. Again, that will be an absolute step change, but that's because I'm not sat here trying to protect an IT service. I am here to deliver the protections that you need in the right way that give you the best bang for buck. And that's all I can do. But you are in a much better place, and it is a constantly improving journey.
I certainly welcome the multi-factor authentication, which has been long overdue, in my opinion, for us to log in, because our inboxes obviously have a lot of information in. Can I take it that members are broadly happy with this paper? Now, in the last 5 minutes, we are moving to the last, item 8, member ICT update. Obviously, Simon is not the help desk, so we can't ask him all our individual problems. And certainly from the debate we've had tonight and setting up this meeting earlier, where Claire and Justin were doing a sterling job to try and get the stuff to work, I think I'd certainly like Jane to consider how the common software, which is what residents and stakeholders and people coming to the committee rely on, could be perhaps, whether it's worth it, I don't know before LGR, but I'd certainly like to put that forward to members, because to me this is a point of failure in terms of democracy, where we can't always live stream meetings, or we have to delay starts on meeting, or you have a planning committee where someone can't talk. But I don't know if I'm seeing some nods around for that, but I'm very open to other ideas. Does anyone have questions on the members' ICT that doesn't relate to your own personal IT nightmares? You've got a personal IT nightmare, have you, Councillor Davey?
It's more about, would that be a priority for Jane? And I think that's what I'd like to hear, rather than us thinking that's a priority for the council. Yes. So it's
absolutely
more about what did Jane say would be a priority, because that's the one I'd be...
What, in terms of the IT system in
here?
here?
Yeah, I mean, my question would be, this is, for me, in terms of resident engagement, democracy, it's a problem. But I do appreciate with LGR and obviously the proposals potentially to redevelop, that might not be cost effective, but I certainly would like, to take your views on it now or when you can review it.
We're right in the middle of, well, nearly finished putting together kind of the more detailed operational delivery plans. And I think it is an issue. It does definitely affect the Democratic Services team quite badly, but we need to have a look at what it would actually entail. Because it currently sits under my purview. It's just not within 3C ICT. No, it sits under the facilities team, and I have little idea why that was done that way. It was before my time.
That's fine. I'm very happy to leave it with Jane to consider. Councillor Clough.
Sorry, I think I've just dropped off the comprehension ladder here. Are we talking about what actually happens on the laptops that we use for our council work, and what is that environment, and how should that be delivered?
I personally wasn't. I was talking, in the report, it obviously does cover what, in my view, are quite positive changes that could come forward for members, so I appreciate there is a cost associated with that. I was talking specifically about the software in the Guildhall, where it allows us to put democracy out there.
Because I think there is an issue that basically we are providing an environment and licensing and all the rest of it, and I don't know how any of that works, but I get in and get my emails and all that sort of thing, but you know, if there's a broader issue there, we perhaps should be thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have about 1 minute left before our guillotine. I don't know if, has anyone else got any questions they want to ask on this one? Simon and Jane, do you want to mention? I mean, my view is in the briefing, it does, in my view, suggest some quite positive moves that I think would answer Councillor Clough, but obviously please do.
All I would say is, as you have seen, we are making significant investments in the technology platforms and the security, etc., etc. And to me, it is madness that members wouldn't also benefit from those investments and have the same level of protection and access to systems and opportunities of different ways of working that officers are going to benefit through investment. That is why we're looking to do this. It means that you are on a equal footing and you gain the benefits from those investments, which you have not done for many years.
Thank you very much. I think we've come to the end of those. Just to note, as usual, the work plan is at the end. The civic quarter, which Councillor Clough has raised, is on there for when a decision comes forward. Again, as ever, if members have something you want to suggest to myself and the Vice Chair to put on the work plan, please let us know. Send us an email. Councillor Davey, have I forgotten something?
No, sorry, is there going to be an issue, presumably, with what happens post-election? Presumably, we'll be reviewing what we do.
My understanding is with the work plan, I suppose whoever takes over as chair and vice chair, if it's not myself and Councillor Clough,
the membership might be completely different.
Yeah, but I think that's why it stays on the work plan, just like it would stay on the forward plan, and then the next selection of officers and members can make that choice. But I think we need to leave them on there so that we have a legacy.
It's just a busy process.
Absolutely.
Katie,
That's my. This is the first time we've done it, but that's my assumption is because we've got stuff on there that could be 2 years down the line for Civic Quarter and Heat Network. Can I just say thank you very much to members? Thank you to Justin and Claire. I'm going to ask Claire to finish the live stream now, please.